Good evening, everybody. It is Steve Lookner with Agenda Free TV. We are going live tonight to bring you an update on the latest in the Israel-Hamas hostage crisis. Around roughly 100 hostages from Israel are still believed to be held in Gaza by Hamas. Around a third of them are believed to be dead, but around 2/3 of them are believed to be alive. And protests continue today in Israel, with protesters calling for the Israeli government to make a ceasefire deal to get the hostages home. But Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a press conference that many interpreted as suggesting that a deal is not close. So we want to talk about the latest updates from today in this story, and also take your comments and questions on the air. We'll talk about the protests. We'll talk about Netanyahu's press conference. We'll talk about the Philadelphia corridor, and take some comments and questions from you guys. So this comes just a day after. It's Tuesday in Israel right now, but it's Monday night in the U.S. And on Sunday, which we did cover, on Sunday, 6 Israeli hostages were found by the Israeli military in Gaza, and they had recently been killed by Hamas, according to Israel. So it has really ramped up this hostage crisis even further and increased pressure on Netanyahu to try to make a deal, but from some people in Israel. But right now, a deal is not looking that close. Israel's allies, like U.S. and the U.K., do not seem particularly happy with the way Netanyahu is conducting this negotiation. President Biden today, I believe, said he wanted Netanyahu to be doing more to get a ceasefire deal. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to bring you up to date, and we're going to take some comments and questions from you guys. So some different opinions in Israel on whether there should be a deal, what the negotiation should say, and all that. But the deaths of these 6 hostages who were found on Sunday, who the Israel according to I think it's the Israeli Health Ministry, who said that it is believed that these hostages were killed around 48 to 72 hours before they were found. That has really made this crisis even more intense in Israel about what to do with this ceasefire negotiation. So we're going to bring you up to date here, and again, take your comments and questions. Let me just, there was that, the 48 to 72 hours number. I know I had the source of that yesterday. Seeing if I can quickly find it here for you. I posted it. I literally posted it. Where is it here? If I can find it. I'm going to have to find it. It's on my X account, the 48 to 72 hours number, the source of that. This is what happens when I try to find something on my own timeline. I can't find it. I'll do one quick search. Yeah, so for example, there's a Reuters article and said authorities said that they were shot between 48 and 72 hours before being found by Israeli forces. So anyways, okay, so let's get into this. Let's start talking about the latest developments. If there's anything new that happens while we're on the air, I'll certainly let you know. I mean, right now it's 4:08 a.m. Israel time, I believe, so I'm not expecting anything new to happen right this second, but you never know. I'll certainly be keeping my eye out for any kind of big updates while we're on the air. Hey, and a quick thanks to our moderators, by the way, who are here with us. We have moderating right now. Cynthia Moon is moderating, and Sabrina is moderating. Thank you, Sarah55 as well. And we have Linda Belk and Larry moderate for us on X. Over there on Twitch right now, we have DeBears and Sarah moderating over there. Thank you. And I want to thank our Facebook moderators as well. Let's see here. Hang on a moment. And we have Charlotte Webb moderating over on Facebook. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ronald Egnor is there. Thank you. And a quick thank you for your support, Martin Gingrich. Think and Repent, thank you for the gift memberships, as well as PZ Babazulu, thank you for the gift memberships. Thanks Chris Canada, Quebec City for your support. Thank you also Deshark for the gift memberships. It's very kind of you. I Love Reading, thank you. Night Owl, thank you. Sarah's Crochet and so on, thank you. And JoJo77JLD, thank you. All right, I want to begin by talking about a little about this press conference from, Netanyahu today. And unfortunately, I do not own the rights. I do not own the rights to an English language translation of this press conference. If I did, I would just show you the press conference. I can show it in Hebrew. I don't think for most viewers that's going to be that enlightening. So I'm not going to show the press conference in Hebrew. I skimmed through it. It appeared to be all in Hebrew to me. But we'll talk about the press conference, and I'll show you some analysis of it. Hang on a second here. Oops. What am I hearing? I'm hearing something. What am I hearing? Why was I... Oh, I know what I was hearing. Okay. There is Netanyahu at the press conference right there. Okay, so let's get into this. Yeah, I have I'm not showing it right now. I have a camera of the Gaza-Israel border. I also have a camera of the Lebanon-Israel border. I'm not expecting anything to happen, so I'm not showing it right now. If I have a camera and there is something going on, I will certainly show it to you. But I thought it would just be distracting to have a live camera up when I don't expect anything to happen. So I will certainly keep an eye on things, and if I feel that there is, if I am aware of something going on one of the live cameras, I will certainly show it to you. Okay, so let's talk some about this press conference that happened today, and I'll show you some analysis of it. Yeah, I don't have a camera from Jenin, and I'm not aware of any kind of big events going on in Jenin. Again, if I have any cameras and there's big dealings going on them, I will certainly show them to you. Okay. Oh, so I'm sorry. Dog says the last of the press conferences in English. Is that true? Because I didn't watch the whole press conference. I skimmed through it, and when I looked at the end, I didn't see it in English. So I would show you, I'm happy to show you the end of the press conference if it's in English. But I didn't see that before. I mean, I can, really quick, what I'll do is I can maybe download a copy of it here. And let me just do that. I can quickly go through it here. Won't be hard for me to do that. If you give me a second here. Let me take a second and do that. Did anybody else see that? Was there English in the press conference today? Because I know sometimes I feel like there's English. The last question was in English. All right, I'm not gonna. Maybe we'll worry about it in a little bit. Let's start the stream. I don't want to have the stream start with 10 minutes of me downloading something and searching through a video. Okay, let's just start talking about the press conference. Here we go. Netanyahu pushes back. Netanyahu pushes back. Hang on a moment here. Netanyahu, our viewers are saying the last question and answer was in English. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. Let's get into this. Netanyahu pushes back against new pressure over Gaza and hostages. No one will preach to me. This is from Associated Press. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today being Monday, it's Tuesday in Israel, pushed back against a new wave of pressure to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza after hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested and went on strike, and U.S. President Biden said he needed to do more after nearly 11 months of fighting. In his first public address since Sunday's mass protests showed many Israelis' furious response to the discovery of 6 more dead hostages, Netanyahu said he will continue to insist on a demand that has emerged as a major sticking point in talks continued Israeli control of the Philadelphia corridor, a narrow band along Gaza's border with Egypt, where Israel contends Hamas struggles weapons into Gaza. Egypt and Hamas deny it. So it's already getting complicated here with this Philadelphia corridor thing. So we'll talk about this. But the basic idea here is, again, yesterday these 6 hostages were found. Let's kind of go over the general situation here. Hang on. Here are the pictures of the 6 hostages. So these are 6 Israeli hostages, and on Sunday morning, the Israeli military found them in a tunnel in Rafah, Gaza. And Israel says that they were recently killed. Israeli authorities say that they were killed, it's estimated, between 48 and 72 hours before the Israeli military found them. So there's been a bunch of anger in Israel because some people think that there should have been a ceasefire deal already and think that, well, if we had a ceasefire deal already, these 6 people would be alive. So that's a little background here. And I want to mention another thing before we talk about the Philadelphia corridor. People might be like, what is that, the Philadelphia corridor? So basically the Philadelphia corridor is, I believe it's 100 yards wide. It's a small strip of land that's in Gaza next to Egypt. So let me pull up a map, because otherwise I think it'll be confusing when we're talking about the Philadelphia corridor. So let me just pull up a map and talk about that for 2 seconds. I don't want people to be confused here. Let's see. I'm pulling up the map right now. Pulling it up right now here on Google Maps. It runs the length of the border, but it's a small strip of land, but it runs the length of the border. Let's see here. Okay, there is Google Maps. Good, good. So here's Gaza, and here's Egypt. I'm going to do it this way. There. Here's Gaza. This is Egypt. This is Israel. The Philadelphia corridor, I kind of want to pull out my little marker here. Let me get my marker out. I'm going to get my marker out so I can draw on it for you. Let's do it this way. Is this going to work? Maybe I'll get my little highlighter thing out. The Philadelphia corridor is basically this. Oops, I'm not doing a good job of drawing. But it's the strip of land. I drew it bigger than it actually is. It's the strip of land, including Rafah Crossing, which runs along the border between, it's on the Gaza side of the Gaza-Egypt border. And it's 100 yards wide, I believe. I'm going to confirm that. And Israel, Netanyahu recently has been saying that whatever deal there is for a ceasefire, Israel will have to be allowed to keep troops on this Egypt-Gaza border to make sure Gaza isn't smuggling stuff in from Israel and Hamas isn't smuggling stuff in from Israel, like weapons, for example. And that is this big sticking point in the negotiations. Whether Netanyahu really wants that, or whether Netanyahu actually doesn't want to make a deal for political reasons, is a whole other debate that has gone on. Some people think that Netanyahu just doesn't want to make a deal at all because part of his support in the government of Israel is these right-wing parties who would not favor a ceasefire deal. So if Israel makes a ceasefire deal now, it's possible that Netanyahu would no longer have enough support to stay in power as prime minister, and his government could collapse. And so there's other concerns. There's other details of this too, but a short version here is some believe that Netanyahu is looking out for his own political interests and not making a deal. Now Netanyahu, I think, if you his version would be, I'm looking out for Israel's interests because I don't want like a bad deal for Israel. I'm not telling you what to think. So kind of setting the stage here for some of what we're going to be talking about. Okay. So we have like two viewers. Scylla says Bibi should never give up the Philadelphia corridor. Whereas a whole Bible believer thinks Bibi only cares about staying in power. Now, by the way, for the last number of years, I think Israel has not had a permanent presence on that corridor. I believe Egypt has had soldiers in that corridor since, I think, 2007. Anyways, I just wanted to, we'll talk more about this, but when you hear Philadelphia corridor, I know it's kind of a strange term. It's a narrow strip of land that runs along the border between Gaza and Egypt on the Gaza side. Let me see if I can get the exact measurement. Yes. So I know, like there's an article on AIPAC, which is an Israeli lobby, which is a pro-Israel lobby group, and they say it's 100 meters wide. Middle East Eye, it's 100. I said 100 yards. It's like I'm seeing multiple reports. It's 100 meters wide. 100 meters wide. Okay. It's a strip of land that runs along the border. Okay. Now that being said, with that background, now let's go back and talk about the press conference today. Because one of the things that Netanyahu in the press conference talked about is not wanting to give up this Philadelphia corridor, or not give it up because Israel didn't have troops there immediately before, but wanting to keep Israeli troops there. Okay. Then we'll take some comments from you guys. Netanyahu pushes back against new pressure over Gaza and hostages. No one will preach to me. So AP says, and yeah, see, and now let me just do this for a second. Hold on. You'll notice here, it looks on the graph, he's talking about how, see, there are these arrows and there's weapons. So I assume when he was talking at this point, he was talking, yes, well, it says it in the caption. He was talking about arms being brought across the border to Hamas, being across the southern border, the Philadelphia corridor strip. It says Prime Minister Netanyahu stands before a map of the Gaza Strip, telling viewers how Hamas has imported arms into the territory since Israel's withdrawal in 2005 in the news conference today. See, that's the Philadelphia corridor down here. Okay, so Prime Minister Netanyahu on Monday pushed back against a new wave of pressure to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza after hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested and went on strike, and U.S. President Biden said that Netanyahu needed to do more after nearly 11 months of fighting. In his first public address since Sunday's mass protests showed many Israelis' furious response to the discovery of 6 more dead hostages, Netanyahu said he will continue to insist on a demand that has emerged as a major sticking point in talks: continued Israeli control of the Philadelphia corridor, a narrow band along Gaza's border with Egypt, where Israel contends that Hamas smuggles weapons into Gaza. Egypt and Hamas deny it. Netanyahu called the corridor vital to ensuring Hamas cannot rearm via tunnels. This is the oxygen of Hamas, he said. And he added, no one is more committed to freeing the hostages than me. No one will preach to me on this issue. Israelis had poured into the streets late Sunday in grief and anger in what appeared to be the largest protest since the start of the war. Those protests continued today. I don't believe they were as big as last night. I didn't see anything today like I saw last night. We were covering last night where there were a bunch of protesters on a major highway in Tel Aviv. So I didn't see like that happening today. But there were a lot of people out today. The families and much of the public blamed Netanyahu, saying the hostages could have been returned alive, the 6 hostages who were found dead yesterday. The families and much of the public blamed Netanyahu, saying the hostages could have been returned alive in a deal with Hamas. A rare general strike was held across the country on Monday. Late Monday, several thousand demonstrators gathered outside Netanyahu's private home in central Jerusalem, chanting "Deal now" and carrying coffins draped in the Israeli flag. Scuffles broke out when police snatched away the coffins and several protesters were arrested. I might have footage of that I can show you in a little bit. So maybe in a second I'll check on and see if I have that footage after we take some comments from you guys. I'll have to check. Thousands more marched outside Netanyahu's Likud party in Tel Aviv, according to Israeli media. But others, not everybody in Israel says this, others in Israel supported Netanyahu's drive to continue the campaign in Gaza, which was triggered by the, of course, Hamas October 7th attack. Netanyahu says that the continued Israeli assault on Hamas will force militants to give in to Israeli demands, potentially facilitate rescue operations, and ultimately annihilate Hamas. Key ally, the United States, is showing impatience. Biden spoke to reporters as he arrived at the White House for a Situation Room meeting with the U.S. mediation team in negotiations. Asked if Netanyahu was doing enough to bring the hostages home, to make a deal to bring the hostages home, President Biden responded, no. Biden insisted that negotiators remain, quote, very close in a deal, adding, hope springs eternal. Let me read a couple more paragraphs and I'll take some comments from you. So here's a little more on the negotiations from Associated Press. Hamas has accused Israel of dragging out months of negotiations by issuing new demands, including for, here we go again, about the Philadelphia corridor, including for lasting control over the Philadelphia corridor and a second corridor running across Gaza. Hamas has offered to release all hostages in return for an end to the war, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces, and the release of a large number of Palestinian prisoners, including high-profile militants. Broadly, the terms called for under an outline for a deal put forward by Biden in July. Netanyahu has pledged total victory over Hamas and blames Hamas for the failure of the negotiations. On Monday, Netanyahu said he is ready to carry out the first phase of the ceasefire, a plan that would include the release of some hostages, a partial pullout of Israeli troops, and the release of some prisoners held by Israel. But Netanyahu rejected a full withdrawal from Gaza, saying he saw no other party that could control Gaza's borders. Okay. What do you think about this? We're going to have a lot more details on this. But what do you think about this? I want to take some comments from you. Do you think there's any chance of a ceasefire deal? What are your thoughts? Let me take some comments from you guys on this before getting to some more details. Oh, hold on a second. Do I have this? This would be nice if I could show you this. Oh, you know what I'm going to show you in a second, guys? You know what I found? I actually found this. In a second, we'll look at this. This is interesting. Why is Israel demanding control over 2 Gaza corridors in the ceasefire talks? Oh, that's interesting. Do they have a graphic? There's no graphic there. Anyways, we'll talk about that. All right, let me take some comments from you. before I talk some more, let me take some comments from you guys. What do you guys think? Is there any chance of a deal or not? Mr. Foley says peace was never an option. Rand B says no deal this week, maybe next week. Troy says neither side wants peace. Sudoku Dragon says eventually there will be a peacekeeping deal. I Love Reading says there's going to be no ceasefire. We have a pretty split chat. I've asked this question before, but, well, I asked it yesterday. I said, will there be a ceasefire deal soon? How about will there ever be will there be a ceasefire deal that will bring some hostages home? How's that? Yes or no? I'm going to do a little poll right now in our chat and see what you guys think. Will there be a ceasefire deal that will bring some hostages home? Let's see what you guys say. All right, I don't know. I think people are still pretty pessimistic. Now, I didn't specify the timing on the deal. I just said, will there be a ceasefire deal that will bring some hostages home? On YouTube, 83% of you think no. There will be no ceasefire deal that will bring some hostages home. How about on Twitch? What do people on Twitch say? Let me see. I'm pulling it up. Oops, why is that not showing? Oh, hold on. I know why it's not showing. There we go. On Twitch, we have 76% say no on Twitch. 25% say yes. On YouTube, 84% say no, 16% say yes. So you guys are pretty pessimistic about the possibility of a deal. Shane Fage says there will be no deal as long as an occupying force is on the table. You mean, Shane, that as long as Israel says they want to keep troops in Gaza after the fighting, there will be no deal? Lucid Words thinks that the Philadelphia corridor issue is also that Hamas won't smuggle hostages out of Gaza. Now, I haven't heard that. Maybe Netanyahu has said that at some point. I have not heard of that. Jessica Johnson thinks Biden needs to butt out and let Israel handle their business. Our viewer Soak01 thinks there will be a deal sooner or rather later, but rather later. Moose says any other deal than zero military capability in Gaza is just political. You're saying if Israel makes a deal that leaves Hamas with military capability, is that what you're saying, Moose? Slippy says, I think Yahya Sinwar, now being the total leader of Hamas, makes things more difficult too. He was instrumental in planning the October 7th attack. You're saying the total leader because the previous political leader of Hamas was assassinated, presumably by Israel, in Iran several weeks ago. All right. Oops, sorry. Let me. All right. Thank you for voting in the poll. So you guys are pretty pessimistic here. Let me remove this. And Bruce Hill thinks any deal will give Hamas a propaganda victory. Paula Thompson says, Israel said they won't stop until Hamas is destroyed. You can't destroy an ideology. Susan Priest Buchner thinks Biden needs to get out of it. Karen Horvath thinks if Israel leaves, Hamas will start back up. Okay. Hey, let's talk about this for a second. Let's talk a little more about these corridors. It's very interesting. Oops, sorry. I want to go to this. Not there. Can't even find it. Why is Israel demanding control over 2 corridors in the ceasefire talks? Oh, that's actually a picture of the Philadelphia corridor. A Palestinian flag is seen with the background of a section of the wall in the Philadelphia corridor between Egypt and Gaza, near the southern Gaza town of Rafah. The Philadelphia corridor is like a 100-meter wide strip of land. Is this flag like in the corridor? I'm a little confused on that. This says Palestinians displaced by the Israeli bombardment of the northern Gaza Strip play next to the border with Egypt in Rafah along the Philadelphia corridor. I think the Philadelphia corridor is behind this wall. That again, it's an area of the Philadelphia corridor is 100. I don't know though. It's 100 meters wide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Philadelphia corridor, because this is being talked about a lot. Israel's demand for lasting control over 2 strategic corridors in Gaza, which Hamas has long rejected, threatens to unravel ceasefire talks aimed at ending the 10-month war, freeing scores of hostages, and preventing an even wider conflict. So the 2 corridors are. Hold on, I want to mention this. Tell you that I'm going to show you where the second corridor is. It's the Netzarim corridor is the second one. I wonder if I have a picture of the Netzarim corridor I can show you. Maybe I do. Hang on. Maybe I have one. Let's see. Let's see if I can find you a picture of the Netzarim corridor. I got one. It's right here. It's on Wikipedia. Right there, Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is a zone of occupation that Israel has set up in the Gaza Strip during the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. The corridor splits the strip into a northern zone and a southern zone. According to the Institute for the Study of War, in July, Israel increased the width of the corridor from 2 kilometers to 4 kilometers. So it's about 2.5 miles wide. So that's the Netzarim corridor, and that is this strip of land about 2.5 miles wide that runs across Gaza. So Israel currently wants to keep troops there too. They want to keep troops on this strip running across Gaza, and they want to keep troops along the southern border of Gaza with Egypt. 2 corridors. Okay? So you might say, why do they want this? Why is Israel demanding control over these 2 Gaza corridors in the ceasefire talks? Officials close to the negotiations, say Associated Press, have said Israel wants to maintain a military presence in a narrow buffer zone along the Gaza-Egypt border it calls the Philadelphia corridor, and in an area that it carved out that cuts off northern Gaza from the south, known as the Netzarim corridor. Okay. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says control of the Egypt border area, the Philadelphia corridor, is needed to prevent Hamas from replenishing its arsenal through smuggling tunnels, and that Israel needs a mechanism to prevent militants from returning to the north of Gaza. That mechanism, I think, would be the Netzarim corridor. The north of Gaza, which has largely been isolated since October. Hamas has rejected those demands from Israel, which were only made public in recent weeks. And this article is from August 20th, from like 2 weeks ago. Okay? There was no mention of Israel retaining control of the corridors in earlier drafts of an evolving ceasefire proposal seen by the Associated Press. So today, after Netanyahu's press conference today, where he said he still wanted troops, Israeli troops, on the Philadelphia corridor. I didn't see the whole press conference. I assume he's saying the same thing still about the Netzarim corridor too. But I watched a clip of an interview with the mother, I believe it was, of one of the hostages who's still in Gaza. And the mother of one of the hostages said something to the effect of like, when did we start insisting on this Philadelphia corridor? She was saying this is a new demand that Netanyahu has brought to the table, and that she thinks it's the implication was that it was something that was sort of like being done to stall, and it was not something essential. Yes. So actually, yes. So. Biana Goldriga of CNN, who I think was doing the interview, she posted a clip of it. I'll post a link to it in the chat. But what the mother of the hostage, the mother's name is Mirav Lashem Gonin. What she said was, I'm just asking why Philadelphia corridor is so important. It wasn't important for 8 months. So at least she thinks that Netanyahu is insisting now, like, well, we can't give this up. But that wasn't always the position. That's what the mother of one of the hostages thinks. I'll post a link to the interview in the clip in the chat, and you can see it. I just posted it right now. But to get back here to this, these two corridors, again, one running through the middle of Gaza and one running along the border with Egypt. Hamas, now you might say, well, why does Hamas care if Israel has troops on the southern border of Gaza and running through Gaza? AP says, Hamas says any lasting Israeli presence in Gaza would amount to military occupation, because these troops would not have been there before October 7th. Egypt, which has served as a key mediator in the in the months-long talks, also staunchly opposes an Israeli presence on the other side of Egypt's border with Gaza. What are the corridors, and why does Israel want them? The Philadelphia corridor. Now, I hope you're okay with me talking about this. The reason I'm focusing on this is because it seems to be maybe the big part of the big hang up in the talks right now. So, and we haven't really discussed it much, and I don't see it discussed that much. And I think it's important to understand this to get where the negotiations are at. So I do want to take a second, if it's okay with you guys, and just talk about this in a little more detail. So the Philadelphia corridor, again, is a narrow strip of land running along the border. It's only 100 yards wide, 100 meters wide, running along the border right there. I drew it too far, but it's the southern border of Gaza with Egypt right here. Okay? So that's the Philadelphia corridor, but it's smaller than I drew it. It's 100 meters wide. Okay, so getting back to this, what are the corridors and why does Israel want them? Associated Press says, the Philadelphia corridor is a narrow strip about 100 meters or yards wide in parts, running the 8.6 mile length of the Gaza side of the border with Egypt. It includes the Rafah crossing, which until May was Gaza's only outlet to the outside world not controlled by Israel. Israel says Hamas used a vast network of tunnels beneath that border to import arms, allowing it to build up the military machine it used in the October 7th attack that triggered the war. The Israeli military says it has found and destroyed dozens of tunnels since seizing the corridor in May. So in May, Israel took over this entire border, and Israel controls this border right now. See, look at Gaza. The rest of the border of Gaza does not have. Gaza has this. It's bordered by water on this side, and all of this is bordered with Israel. So Israel can maintain control over what goes in and out of Gaza on this whole part of the border, because Israel is on that part of the border. But the one part of the border Israel does not control is the border between Egypt and Gaza, which is here. So Netanyahu is saying that we want to permanently keep a line of troops on this border. Even though it's a border with Egypt, Netanyahu is insisting that Israel gets to keep troops all along this border, so they can keep anything. They can control what's coming in over land. They can control what they can. They can look and see if there's any tunnels being built. That kind of thing. Okay, so Israeli military says that Israel says that Hamas has been bringing in weapons across the corridor. Across that border. Egypt rejects those allegations. Egypt, which has been in charge of that corridor. I believe Egypt has been in charge of the corridor since 2007. Let me confirm that for you. But I believe that is that Egypt has controlled it since 2007, 2005. 2005? No, 2007. I believe so. Hold on. Let me just make sure of this. That's my understanding. Anyways, let's move along from that. But it hasn't been under Israeli control. Maybe I got to check that. I thought Egypt had control of the. That's kind of an important question. Let's see here. Can I find this? Maybe it might even say in this article. I'll feel kind of stupid if it says it later in the article. Let's just keep going here. So, anyways, so Egypt says that it has destroyed. Egypt says it has destroyed hundreds of tunnels on its side of the border years ago and set up a military buffer zone of its own that prevents smuggling. So maybe Egypt doesn't cover. Maybe Egypt doesn't. Egypt obviously has control of its own side of the border with Gaza. I don't know if it controls the Philadelphia corridor currently, but the roughly 4-mile Netzarim corridor runs from the Israeli border to the coast just south of Gaza City, severing the city's largest metropolitan area and the rest of the north and the south. So the Netzarim corridor again is here. That's the one running right across Gaza, where Israel has troops now. That's this one, and Hamas has demanded. Hamas has demanded that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who fled the north be allowed to return to their homes. Israel has agreed to their return, but wants to ensure they are not armed. So why do Hamas and Egypt not want Israel to have troops? Why do Hamas and Egypt not want Israel to have troops running across the Gaza-Egypt border on the Gaza side from here to here in the Philadelphia corridor? And also, why does Hamas and Gaza not, and why do Hamas and Egypt not want Israel having troops in this couple-mile wide corridor running right across Gaza? Why do they object to that? Well, Israeli control over either corridor would require closed roads, fences, guard towers, and other military installations. Checkpoints are among the most visible manifestations of Israel's open-ended military rule over the West Bank, which is on the other side of Israel, and over Gaza prior to Israel's 2005 withdrawal from Gaza. Israel says such checkpoints are needed for security, but Palestinians view them as a humiliating infringement on their daily life. They would also be seen by many Palestinians as a prelude to a lasting military occupation and the return of Jewish settlements to Gaza, something Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners have openly called for. Hamas has demanded a total Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and accuses Netanyahu of setting new conditions in order to sabotage the talks. Egypt says Israel's operations along the border threaten the landmark 1979 peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Egypt has refused to open its side of the Rafah crossing until Israel returns the Gaza side of the border to Palestinian control. So I think with the Philadelphia corridor, and I won't get hung up on this, I think with the Gaza-Egypt border, obviously Egypt controls their side of the border. I think maybe since 2007, the Palestinians have controlled this side of the border. For a while, but Egypt, I know Egypt was allowed to have troops there for a while. So I got to figure that out. I could have swore I read that Egypt was still allowed to have troops there. I need to figure that out. Anyways, let me just read a little more of this and then I'll take some more comments from you. Are these new demands by Israel? Israel insists that this is not a new demand. Again, some people say, like the mother of the hostage I heard interviewed today, she says this is a new demand, that Netanyahu before was not insisting on having Israeli troops running across, for example, the southern border of Gaza and Egypt. Are these new demands by Israel? Israel insists they're not, referring to them as clarifications to an earlier proposal announced by President Biden in a May 31st speech and also the UN Security Council in a rare ceasefire resolution. Israel also accuses Hamas of making new demands since then that it cannot accept. But neither the speech by Biden nor the Security Council resolution made any reference to Israel's demands regarding the two corridors, which were only made public in recent weeks, and both Biden's speech and the Security Council resolution referred to a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces, which suggests it is a new demand. The U.S. has also said it is against any reoccupation of Gaza or reduction of its territory. Okay. We'll kind of skip ahead here. All right. So you can see this. Just to sum up here, Israel is saying now that it wants troops as part of a ceasefire deal. It wants its troops to be able to stay on this narrow strip of land running across the entire southern border between Rafah and, on the Palestinian side of the border, or the Gaza side of the border, with Egypt. And Israel also insists that they want to have troops be allowed to stay in Gaza on this line, this couple mile wide strip that runs through Gaza, dividing the north and the south. That is what they are saying now. They want to maintain control of those two corridors. Okay? Let me take some more comments from you. So, again, I know it gets into a little detail, but I think it's important. Okay, let's see here. B. Blake says, don't the tunnels underground go under Egypt? Yes, if there are tunnels going into Gaza, they need to go from somewhere. So yes, if there are tunnels running from Egypt to Gaza, they have to go in part under Egypt. But, you know, it says right here, now I don't know the details here, Israel says Hamas has used a vast network of tunnels beneath the Egypt-Gaza border to import arms, allowing it to build up the military machine it used in the October 7th attack that triggered the war. The Israeli military says it has found and destroyed dozens of tunnels since seizing the corridor in May. Egypt rejects those allegations, saying it destroyed hundreds of tunnels on its side of the border years ago and set up a military buffer zone of its own that prevents smuggling. So Egypt is saying, we've already destroyed these tunnels. Israel would disagree with them. Tiger says there are tunnels from Gaza into Israel as well. So I know there have been tunnels in the past from Gaza into Israel where, in the past there have been issues with like Gaza militants using tunnels to launch attacks into Israel. I don't know that currently is seen as a major issue because Israel does control the border. So, it's not like if in theory Israel can get at any tunnel that would be going from Gaza into Israel. I think the big worry for Israel is that if there's tunnels under the southern border, the border with Egypt, Israel can't start digging into the ground there and dismantling the tunnel because unless they have troops there. That is what Israel would say. Bob P. says, at the time of the UN resolution, the knowledge of how big the tunnels were not known, right? I don't know how much Israel knew about tunnels of, a few months ago compared to now. And I don't know what Israel has been saying about that. That I don't know what their state of knowledge, how much their state of knowledge about the tunnels has changed since they've actually been there since May. Let's see here. Oh, I got it. I got the answer to my question about the Philadelphia corridor. Okay. Sorry, I forgot about this. I read this last night. I know this is detailed, but I think this is important. So the corridor itself is on the border between Gaza and Egypt. Now, when Israel left Gaza in 2005, the Philadelphia Accord with Egypt was concluded, which authorized Egypt to deploy 750 border guards along the route to patrol the border on Egypt's side. So technically, in the Egypt-Israel peace treaty in 1979, that was when Israel was still in Gaza, okay? So there was this border area that was set up so I think it was like a border area set up between a border area set up between Egypt and Israel. So this strip was set up initially in 1979 when Israel was in Gaza. And there was an Egyptian side of this strip and a Israeli side of this strip, I believe it was. So there's Gaza, and then there's Egypt, and then there's this strip of land that runs between them. And that strip of land has a part of it that's been controlled by Egypt, patrolled by Egypt, and part of it that's been overseen by the Palestinians. I don't know if this is making sense to you. It's confusing. But the original Philadelphia corridor came into existence in 1979. That's my understanding. And then following Israel's disengagement from the Gaza Strip, the Philadelphia Accord with Egypt was concluded. This was in 2005, which authorized Egypt to deploy 750 border guards along the route to patrol the border on Egypt's side of the border. The Palestinian side of the border was controlled by the Palestinian Authority until the 2007 takeover by Hamas. Okay. So I believe that Egypt still has troops on their side of the corridor. I know this is really confusing. Okay, probably nobody's watching anymore because I've been talking about the Philadelphia corridor for half an hour. But I think it's important. Anyways, all right, let me get to some more comments. Let's move on from the Philadelphia corridor. Let's talk about some more different issues. I'm going to take some more comments from you guys too. But hopefully we now at least know that that Netanyahu is insisting that Israel gets to keep troops all across this border here with Egypt and Gaza, and on this this corridor running through the middle of Gaza. And Hamas does not want that, and Egypt does not want that. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And there's this question of, is this a new demand? Is this something that Netanyahu has just brought to the table so that there won't be a deal? Or not? Okay, so I know it's confusing. This is a Wikipedia diagram, by the way. All right, hang on a second. I'm going to take a few more comments here. There's other stuff to talk about too. There's this whole thing that Hamas came out with today. I want to talk about this thing Hamas came out with today. We got to talk about that. This new Hamas statement. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. Okay, I'm going to talk about that next. Let me read a few more comments. Hey, a quick thank you, by the way. Thank you to Walter Beasley for your support. I really appreciate it, Walter. Thank you to Camus. Camus says that it's confusing. He's not sure if it's a Philadelphia corridor stuff is a real concern, or if it's just Netanyahu being a pain in the you-know-what. That's what Camus says. Thanks to Shai Lavi for your support. Thanks to Saranya for your support. Saranya thinks that Egypt has been allowing a lot of weapons smuggling into Gaza through the Philadelphia corridor, and thinks that Egypt is not trustworthy to maintain the border. That's what our viewer Saranya thinks. Thank you also, Linda Cosma, our member. Thank you, Adopt a Pitbull Save a Life. Adopt a Pitbull Save a Life thinks that Biden can force a deal by putting sanctions back on Iran and tightening screws on Qatar and Egypt, who helped Hamas. He's a coward. Corridor is because weapons come through for Hamas fighters and hostages movement. That's what Adopt a Pitbull thinks. Thanks, Adopt a Pitbull. Thanks also, Shai Lavi, for your support. Shai Lavi thinks only demonstrations and Israel and Gaza will bring a deal. Thank you, Aleppo Gambit, for your support, and Victoria Neeson, who says, how much longer will this go on? Thank you, Victor901 and Eric C. And also, I want to shout out our moderators, too. Also, thank you to Kristen Gates for your support. I really appreciate that, Kristen. Let me shout out our moderators, and then we're going to take some more comments and questions for you and giving you some more updates. I got to check the news to make sure I'm not missing some breaking news right now, too. So let me do that. Moderating right now, we have Sabrina is moderating on YouTube. Keisha Fowler is moderating. Hello, Keisha. And Linda Belk and Larry moderate for us on X. Thank you. And on Twitch we have moderating. Hang on a moment. Big Ball of Yarn, DeBears, Good Luck Duck, I Got That Fire, Sarah. They're all moderating. Thank you. And over on Facebook we have moderating. Charlotte Webb is there. Ronald Egnor is there. Thank you so much for moderating. And hang on a second here. Raven Lynn is moderating. And thanks to Big Boss Now for subscribing on Twitch. And for your support, Notorious Rob over there on Twitch. Thank you. Okay. And okay, so the next thing I want to bring up is this statement that came out from Hamas today. So Hamas released a statement today that, hold on a second. There may be a couple statements from Hamas today. Yeah, Hamas released a statement today implying that they had indeed killed the hostages when Israeli forces were getting close. And also, in the Hamas statement, they said they have issued instructions to their fighters hold on a second here. I believe to kill them if Israel gets close to them. Yeah, I'll read you the statement and you can see it. Let me read you that statement. Hold on a second here. Yes, okay. Okay, so here's the statement. I'm going to put it on the screen right now from you. There's actually two statements. There's two statements here. Let me read you the first one. This is from Hamas. This is from their Telegram. I'm going to show you the statement that Hamas posted on their Telegram. Okay? Okay, here is the Hamas statement. It says, from Abu Ubaidah, military spokesman for the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas. Now, so remember, as background here, 6 Israeli hostages were found dead on Sunday by the Israeli military. Just as background here, these 6 people, 5 of the 6 were taken hostage at this music festival in southern Israel. The first 5 you see there were taken hostage at this music festival in southern Israel on October 7th, and the 6th was taken hostage from the Be'eri area on October 7th of last year. And they were all found dead in a tunnel in Rafah, and Israel says that they had been recently killed by Hamas. Israeli authorities estimated between 48 and 72 hours before they were found, they were killed by Hamas. Okay? So here is this statement today. And as I said when we covered that, condolences to the families of those 6. It's just terrible. So here's a statement that Hamas made about this. From Abu Ubaidah, military spokesman for the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas. Only Netanyahu and the occupation army, the Israeli army, bear full responsibility for the killing of the prisoners after they deliberately disrupted any deal to exchange prisoners for their personal and narrow interests, in addition to their deliberate killing of dozens of them through direct aerial bombardment. So that first paragraph is saying that it's Netanyahu and Israel's fault that these hostages were killed because Netanyahu and Israel disrupted any deal because of their own personal and narrow interests. They're basically saying that, like, in part, that Netanyahu is putting his personal interests in the way of a deal, and also that they're claiming that Israel has deliberately killed dozens of hostages in their aerial bombardment of Hamas, which in Gaza, which we don't know if that's true. Hamas frequently claims that Israel has killed Israeli hostages in their strikes in Gaza. Anyways, moving on, they say, we say to everyone clearly that after the Nuseirat incident. So the Nuseirat incident is this, just so you understand what they're talking about here. The Nuseirat incident is the Nuseirat refugee camp massacre, which happened on June 8th in Gaza. This is a Wikipedia page, in which the Israeli military killed, so the numbers are disputed, but a number of Gazans were killed and injured in this hostage rescue operation in the Nuseirat refugee camp. The operation's objective was to free multiple hostages. The Israeli military said that fewer than 100 Palestinians died in that event. But you can see, while the Israeli military was praised for its successful rescue of 4 Israeli hostages, it was condemned for the high civilian death toll in that incident. Both humanitarian organizations and governments described the assault as a massacre. So anyways, that happened in June. And so what Hamas said today is, after that Israeli rescue operation back in June, in which a number of Palestinians were killed and Israel rescued 4 hostages, they said today, Hamas, that after that, new instructions were issued to the Mujahideen, the fighters, assigned to guard the prisoners, regarding dealing with them if the occupation army approached their place of detention. Hear that? So they say, after Israel rescued these four hostages in June, after Israel rescued them, we gave new instructions to the Hamas fighters who were holding the hostages on what to do with the hostages if the Israeli military got close. Now, it doesn't specifically say there what the instructions were, but I mean, I think the implication is that the instructions were kill the hostages, right? Because they're referring to the 6 hostages who were found yesterday. And what this also suggests, now I don't know if this is true, this also suggests that any hostages still alive are being kept guarded by people who've received the same instructions. So there's an implication here that, hey, Israel, if you're not going to be able to militarily rescue any more of these like you did in June, because we've now told the guards to kill them all if you get close. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know that Israel wouldn't militarily rescue them, but that seems to be what the implication is here of today of this Hamas statement, is saying, look, you're not getting any hostages back by rescuing them anymore, because we've told the guards to kill them all if you get close. And as you can see, they were killed. 6 of them were killed, that you found on Sunday. So Adir, our viewer, says, sounds like psychological warfare. AC says, so if they get close, kill your bargaining chip, right? Well, look, I mean, I know what you're saying, AC, kill your bargaining chip, because these hostages do have an important political value for Hamas. But what we can't deny is that 6 hostages were found yesterday by Israel. Israel says that the Hamas recently killed them. So they did kill them. Now you might say, well, why wouldn't Hamas have just taken the hostages somewhere else rather than kill them? But I mean, maybe it was the case that the Israeli military was in such a position that escape was not feasible anymore. I don't know. So because what AC is saying is like, well, they're saying they'll kill them, but Hamas isn't going to want to kill all the hostages because that's a bargaining chip for them. But it looks like they did kill 6 of them. So I take it to you what to read into this, but there's the implication is that we've told the guards to kill any of them if you get close to rescuing them. That's what the implication here is in the statement. Okay, this next paragraph, and this is a Hamas statement from today. The next paragraph says, Netanyahu's insistence on liberating the prisoners through military pressure instead of concluding a deal will mean that they will return to their families inside coffins, and their families will have to choose whether they're dead or alive. Well, look, I was stupid of me to not read you the next paragraph first, because this makes it more explicit here, okay? It's if you had any question as to what the implication was of paragraph 2, that is made explicitly clear in paragraph 3. Again, paragraph 3 says, Netanyahu's insistence on liberating the prisoners through military pressure instead of concluding a deal will mean that they will return to their families inside coffins, and their families will have to choose whether they are dead or alive. Okay, so that's the statement from today. Now, some of you might doubt that. You might, like AC, you might think, well, they're not going to really kill all the hostages. But, I mean, they killed 6. So, but clearly this is also seems to be Hamas trying to put pressure on Israel to make a ceasefire deal with them. All right? There's a second part of the statement too, which I'll have to look at, but I wanted you guys to see this. Our viewer Susie Iris says Hamas is well aware of the internal turmoil in Israel, want to cause civil unrest and turn people on the leadership. Hamas is not negotiable. Our viewer Al Yat Zion says not really a deal when it's blackmail. They are still civilian hostages being used as fodder by Hamas, totally manipulative. I don't know if this last sentence, their families will have to choose whether they're dead or alive. That might be a bad translation, because clearly, as like Alibaba says, it's not really up to the families. That might be a kind of a weird, funky translation of that last few words. Darthis says, for Hamas, it is better that they are dead than rescued. Look at the protests that they got in Israel from killing them. I mean, I think that, as AC says, Hamas would prefer to have the hostages as a bargaining chip than not have them that way, as terribly, as cruelly transactional as that sounds. But, again, the facts are, according to Israel, that Hamas did kill 6 hostages in the last few days when the Israeli military was approaching them. Remember, Israel rescued a hostage, a member of the Bedouin community who was a hostage. They rescued him just a few days before they found the 6 hostages on Sunday. And they rescued him, I think, about a half mile away from where they found the 6 hostages. And according to the Israeli military spokesperson, I think it was yesterday, he said something like that when Israel found that one hostage, they assumed other ones might be nearby. The Israeli forces were in that area for several days. So that is what appears to have happened, and this is Israel saying this, is that Hamas did kill these hostages when Israel was getting close to their location. Will that happen to the rest of the hostages? I don't know if Israel gets close to them. Let's see here. There's another part of the statement. Let me take a few more comments here, though. Let me also do a quick check and make sure. Usually people will tell me if there's some other big news event happening, but I haven't checked in a second. So give me a second and let me just check. Why is that not loading? Why is that not loading? Something isn't loading for me. Oh, now it's loading. Oh, and I know people have been writing to me too, so I want to take some more comments there as well. Let me just do this for a second. All right, hang on a moment here. Our viewer Ariel writes in and says, regarding the Philadelphia corridor and what the hostages' mother said, Netanyahu responded to this claim. He pointed out that since the disengagement from Gaza in 20 something, I think that's a typo, Netanyahu already believed that the Philadelphia corridor was important to remain in Israel's hands, and there was an argument between him and Prime Minister Sharon at the time on this matter. So it sounds like Ariel is saying that in the press conference, Netanyahu is claiming that this is not a new demand, even though the demand wasn't really being publicly said, I guess, a couple months ago, because I showed you the AP article saying that. Thank you, Ariel, for writing in about that. Ariel also thinks that Netanyahu is 100% right. Ariel says, I'm Israeli. And Ariel, our viewer, thinks Netanyahu is 100% right. And Ariel thinks the Philadelphia corridor, which is, again, Netanyahu is insisting that Israel gets to keep troops in Gaza along the line of the southern border with Egypt to prevent stuff being smuggled in from Egypt. So that would be part of Gaza, a narrow strip of land running across the entire border where Israel just gets to keep troops. That's one thing that he wants. So our viewer Ariel thinks Netanyahu is right to insist on this, that the Philadelphia corridor is important to remain under full Israeli control. And Ariel thinks that the goal of Hamas from the beginning was to hold a large number of hostages and while negotiating to break the Israeli spirit. Also, Ariel says, I haven't watched the whole Netanyahu press conference, that Netanyahu said Hamas planned there would be violent demonstrations in Israel and planned psychological pressure on the public in Israel and also psychological pressure on Defense Minister Gallant. Also, Ariel, our viewer, who's Israeli, says he sees no chance of success in the negotiations. He thinks the last Hamas fighter must be destroyed. Hey, thank you, Ariel, for writing in. Ariel also thinks that it's possible that Egypt has made money on smuggling stuff, on allowing stuff to be smuggled in the Gaza Strip. I don't know anything about that personally. Thanks, Ariel, for writing in and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it. Hang on a moment here. One moment here. All right. I want to also mention, by the way, thank you to Bilbo Baggins for your support. Bilbo thinks that Israel is trying to subvert negotiations. They are responsible for the hostages' deaths. Bilbo, I don't want to misinterpret your comment. There's different ways I could read your comment, Bilbo. I can't tell if you're what position exactly you're taking. If you want to message me, you can clarify or throw it in the chat, and hopefully I see it, Bilbo. Thanks, Bilbo, for your support. I don't want to misrepresent your position. Thank you also, Camus, for your support, who says, is there any chance members of parliament would switch parties out of Likud and collapse Netanyahu's coalition? Well, some people think that if Netanyahu were to make a ceasefire deal, that the right-wing parties that support him in the government would not support him anymore, and therefore he would not have enough support to be prime minister. And some people think that's why he won't make a deal. I can't tell you whether that's true or not. Thank you, Camus. Thank you also, Alan Mandel. Alan says they'd smuggle the hostages through the Philly corridor into Egypt and into Iran or anywhere. You know, a couple of our viewers have raised this concern that if Israel is not on the Philadelphia corridor, that Hamas could smuggle the hostages out of Gaza. I have not seen, in all of the articles I've read, I have not seen that raised as a big concern. I don't know if that's a significant Israeli concern. I have not seen it raised in any of the articles I've read. Maybe you guys have seen different stuff than me or seen Netanyahu talk about it or something. But again, I have not seen that raised as a major concern. Thank you, Alan Mandel, for your support and for the comment. Also, thank you to Corey Pelsman. Corey says, after the Bedouin man was rescued by the IDF, he said the Hamas guards ran away when Israel came close. I think after that, Hamas told their guards to do it and violate Islamic law. Let me see if I can find something. I'm sure I can about the person who was rescued, the Bedouin man who was rescued, a few days before the 6 hostages were found. Here's an article about it, but that article doesn't talk about what he says. Yeah, so this was the hostage who was found a few days before the 6 hostages were found dead. You can see right there, Qaid Farhan Al-Qadi. He was found a few days. This is an AP article. He was found a few days where the 6 dead hostages were found, like a half mile away from them. Hold on a second here. Just want to check something. There he is, right there. But I wanted to see here, you can see he was alone. He was found alone. So you can see AP says, Qaid Farhan Al-Qadi was alone underground on Tuesday of last week after 326 days of captivity in Gaza when Israeli forces scouring Hamas's vast tunnel network found him in freedom. Suddenly I heard someone speaking Hebrew outside the door. I couldn't believe it, he said. He was the 8th hostage to be rescued by Israeli forces. He was found in a southern Gaza tunnel where hostages were suspected to be alongside militants and explosives. He was held in a number of locations during his captivity, said Israel. This is interesting. The military said it applied lessons learned during previous operations while rescuing him. Earlier in the war, Israeli troops encountered 3 hostages inside Gaza, and they accidentally shot and killed them, believing them to be militants. Okay. Anyway, so he was found alone. So clearly, he was found alone. I mean, I can't find the statement that our viewer said. But our viewer, Corey, said that the guards ran away when Israel came close. Maybe they did. I can't find that myself. But he was found alone. So it's an interesting thought. I mean, regardless, it's an interesting thought. Did his getting rescued a few days before the 6 hostages were found dead, did that have any impact on things? Did Hamas see him get rescued and say, okay, well, we can't allow anybody else get rescued, right? I don't know. It's a good question that our viewer raises. Thanks to Linda Cosma for the membership, by the way, the gift membership. Also, Shai Lavi. Shai says between 1967 and 1979, both sides of the Philadelphia corridor were under Israeli control. Thank you, Walter Beasley. Okay, hang on a second here. Thanks, Bayou Boy, for subscribing as well. And thanks for your support, Big Boss Now. Oh, I didn't even... Kender thinks that's what happened. Our viewer Kender thinks that he was found on Tuesday and Hamas basically told Hamas members, don't let anybody else get found. I don't know. Deborah Behrens thinks it played a role into what happened to the other hostages who were found about a half-mile away from him. It's an interesting question. I don't know. All right. Hey, by the way, there was another part to that Hamas statement I wanted to go back and check. Let me just finish reading you the Hamas statement, okay? I wanted to finish reading you that, okay? So, as I mentioned, really quick, we talked about this. Hamas came out with a statement today, and they said it's Netanyahu and the Israeli army's fault for the killing of the 6 hostages. They say that Netanyahu and Israel disrupted any deal to exchange prisoners for their personal and narrow interests. And also, they say that after Israel rescued hostages in June, 4 hostages in June, that was a rescue operation in which dozens of Palestinians were killed. But after Israel rescued 4 hostages in June from Gaza, Hamas says it gave new instructions to the people who were guarding the hostages regarding dealing with them if the Israeli army approached their place of detention. And Hamas says Netanyahu's insistence on liberating the prisoners through military pressure instead of concluding a deal will mean that they return to their families inside coffins. Basically saying, you're not going to rescue any more hostages. We're going to kill them if you come close to rescuing them. So, and then the second part of the Hamas statement today, which it's the same statement. It was released at the same time. But the second part of the statement is this. Let me just show you this real quick here. This is also from Hamas. Hamas says Netanyahu's statements are a desperate... So I think this came out after his press conference today. Netanyahu's statements are a desperate speech searching for an illusionary victory that he did not succeed in selling to his audience 11 months after his Nazi war against our people in the Gaza Strip. He and his criminal warlords did not achieve any of their goals other than committing massacres and genocide. So, again, I think this is after the press conference today in which Netanyahu said, for example, he was still insisting that that in any ceasefire agreement, Israel would be allowed to keep troops along the whole southern border of Gaza, inside Gaza, on the border with Egypt, a strip known as the Philadelphia Corridor. So they're saying that Netanyahu's statements are a desperate speech searching for an illusionary victory that he did not succeed in selling to his audience 11 months after his Nazi war against our people in the Gaza Strip. He and his criminal warlords did not achieve any of their goals other than committing massacres and genocide. Netanyahu, they say, is a war criminal who breathes lies to his audience and lies to the American administration, and his statements this evening are full of lies that no longer fool anyone. Again, this is Hamas' statement. Just so you know, this is coming from Hamas. Hamas is and I know most of you know this, probably all of you know this, Hamas are the ones who on October 7th launched that attack into Israel and killed over 1,200 Israelis and took several hundred Israelis hostage. Netanyahu confirms with his statements today, Hamas says, that he is the one who disrupted the exchange deal and the ceasefire agreement. They mean the hostage exchange deal. They call the hostages prisoners. They say all the hostages held by Hamas can return to their families immediately. The one who is delaying their return and the one responsible for their lives is Netanyahu. Every delay in Netanyahu's approval of a ceasefire deal and the commitment to what was reached on July 2nd means putting the lives of more prisoners at risk. So when they say what was reached on July 2nd, I believe part of what they mean is they're saying that the original agreement talked about in the Biden speech and in the UN resolution earlier this summer. Hamas says that did not involve Israel getting to keep troops inside Gaza on the border with Egypt. It did not involve, says Hamas, Israel being allowed to keep Israeli troops on a whole strip running right through the middle of Gaza. So that's what they're saying here. They're saying that they agreed to a deal before and that Netanyahu has changed the terms, wanting Israel to keep troops on these two corridors running across Gaza. And they say, hey, if he just went along with the original deal that we agreed with, the hostages could come home right now. That's what they're saying in the statement. The criminal Netanyahu, they say, bears responsibility for the lives and safety of the hostages, they call them prisoners, held by the resistance, Hamas, and despite Hamas's concern for the safety of the hostages and good treatment of the hostages, Netanyahu continues to insist on killing them and ignoring their conditions. So that is the statement from Hamas, which came out today after Netanyahu's press conference. Okay? So what do you think about that? But you can see they're trying to blame Netanyahu, saying there could have been a deal already if Netanyahu didn't introduce new conditions. Truckee says, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. April Lee, Wax Queen, thinks they are delusional. And he says they started this. Love Grows says, how can you negotiate with Hamas? Now, to be clear, back at the end of last year, there were some deals. I believe, what was it, about 100 hostages were released? How many hostages were released in late last year? I can tell you. But my point is, it's not that there could never be a deal between Israel and Hamas, because there was a deal. I mean, they were able to reach deals late last year. Let me get a number for you. So, according to Wikipedia, 117 hostages have been returned alive to Israel. According to Wikipedia, 105 hostages, civilian hostages, were released, including 81 people from Israel, late last year in those exchanges that happened. You can read about that in this article here, Israel-Hamas War Hostage Crisis. So my point is that it's not that Hamas is literally incapable of making a deal, because Israel and Hamas and other countries did reach a deal at the end of last year. Now, that doesn't mean a deal, I don't know if a deal can be reached now, but it wouldn't be correct to say, well, Hamas will never agree to a deal with anybody on anything, because they actually did reach these deals to get these people released in exchange late last year. I'm not telling you that what the likelihood of it is now. I just want to clarify that there was a deal made late last year, that did succeed in returning some of the hostages. Evie Short says, for a short ceasefire. Kev the Gerb says, Hamas is beyond logic and their minds are totally twisted. Wall Street says you become a prisoner when you commit crimes, you become a hostage when you are kidnapped. So he doesn't like that Hamas refers to them as prisoners. Our viewer Alyat Zion says, a deal that stipulates a permanent ceasefire and complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza ensures Hamas remains in power, and which means they will inevitably attack again. Zing Dingaling says, if you look at released Israeli captives versus released Palestinian prisoners, you can see who treats who better. Santa Frog thinks it is true that these are new demands and says the defense minister of Israel called Bibi out on it. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Thrillin says you don't negotiate with terrorists. No win situation for Bibi. Okay, so that's what the statement was today from Hamas. We have more to talk about here, more to discuss. Hang on a moment here. Oh, I want to talk about what the U.S. thinks about this and allies, what they think about this. U.S. not happy about this. About Netanyahu's current position, and UK is not either. Well, the UK, hold off on my UK comment. There's something else I want to mention about the UK. But UK is not happy about the situation going on in Israel in general. Let me read this for you too. By the way, so you guys, a lot of you. Oh, thanks by the way to Russell Bach for your support. Thank you, Russell. Russell says I can understand why Israel would want troops along the corridor. The Philadelphia corridor running along the Egypt border in Gaza. But both Hamas and Egypt will not accept that tricky situation. Thank you, Russell Bach. Thank you, Walter Beasley. Walter says Hamas is going nowhere. 2.0 Hamas being created by bombing. Sad, so sad. That's what Walter thinks. Thanks, Walter, for your support. And thanks also to our new member, IndyCar. Yeah, the thing I was talking about with the UK. Oh, I really quick to mention this. So, in case you guys weren't here a couple days ago when I talked about this, or yesterday when I talked about this. So, a lot of you know that I have deals with various news content providers where I pay them in exchange for new content, like the live videos I show. I got to pay for those. And also I pay AP and Reuters. For news content from them for like articles and like photos and stuff, which I think is really helpful for you guys and helpful for the streams. And I am also now trying on a temporary basis, trying it with a new publication, the Washington Post. Now I know some of you might think of the Washington Post and say, oh my gosh, they're so left wing. Why would you ever have a deal with Washington Post? Well, I certainly think in their politics, the Washington Post, in some of their articles, especially maybe like editorial stuff, they lean left. I'm not going to deny that there's a general leaning of left to the Washington Post, but I also think they have a lot of really great international and national coverage where the articles have a lot of really good depth to them. And there's plenty of articles you can find in the Washington Post, where you don't see like, oh, this is a clear left-wing bias. So, the point of being able to bring you content from the Washington Post is not to read you some editorial from the Washington Post that says like, Democrats are great, Republicans are bad. Those are not the kind of articles that, not that they would obviously have an article saying exactly that, but you know what I'm saying. There are those articles that get more into like political opinion. That's not the point of my wanting to bring you content from them. They have a lot of really good international content and national news that discusses issues that we cover, and I think in really good depth. So we're going to try it out. We'll see what you think. I'll see what I think. We'll see what you think. I like having the content. Everything is a question of budgetary restrictions, but I also want to know what you think about it too. But I hope you have an open mind about it, and I think you'll find that if you've never really been exposed to them, I think you'll find that you might like the depth that some of their articles go into. Okay. So, anyways, I'm going to show you a couple things that they had today. This I want to just show you real quick. But I was talking about the UK. So this came out today. This is from from Washington Post. UK suspends some arms sales to Israel after government review. Now remember, there was an election in the UK, and the Conservatives lost, and if I'm remembering right, the Labour Party won. So there was a governmental change recently in the UK. Britain is suspending some arms exports to Israel, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy announced today, citing a clear risk that the arms might be used in a serious violation of international humanitarian law. The move marks a shift for the United Kingdom and came as part of the new Labour government's review of Israel's compliance with international law, humanitarian law amid its war in Gaza. Lammy said the government had a legal duty to do the review. The suspended arms export licenses, about 30 out of 350, include sales of components for military aircraft, including fighter aircraft, hospitals, and drones. So the Foreign Secretary said, the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. The Israeli foreign minister said Britain's decision sends a very problematic message to Hamas and its sponsors in Iran. While the Israel's Minister of Defense said he was deeply disheartened by Britain's announcement. Lammy stressed that the suspension was not a blanket ban or arms embargo. Britain has faced mounting pressure in recent months to suspend arms sales to Israel, with protesters gathering in the streets outside government buildings to call for an end to arms transfers. Britain is not a major supplier of arms to Israel and says its arms exports represent 0.02% of Israel's overall military imports. The United States and Germany supply the vast majority of Israel's imported arms. So I was talking about the UK. I just wanted to mention this story. Also, though, it gives you a sense of that if Israel chooses to keep this fight going with Hamas going forward, you get a sense that they could be facing some issues with UK support, given this kind of thing. So I did want to mention that. I don't want to linger on it, but I wanted to mention that real quick. But because I brought up the UK. But also I wanted to mention this here. Biden says Netanyahu not doing enough to secure hostage deal. Okay, this is from Reuters. Biden, oh, do I have a little video I can show you here? Oh, I might have a video I can show you. Ooh. Let's look at a little video here. Oh no, I can't use this I can't use the video in the US because I think it has proprietary footage that cannot be played in the US. I think the video has a clip of Biden saying he's not doing enough. So I'll read you the text, but I can't play the clip. Okay, anyways, Reuters says President Biden said there's certain material, it's the same thing with the live videos. There's certain stuff in some of them that you're not allowed to show in the US. For various reasons, so I have to respect their requests on that video. President Biden said today that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was not doing enough to secure a deal for the release of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas, and the U.S. was close to presenting a final proposal to negotiators working on hostage and ceasefire agreement. We'll have to talk about that too. Biden was speaking to reporters at the White House after Israeli forces over the weekend recovered the bodies of 6 hostages, including a 23-year-old American-Israeli Hirsch Goldberg Poland from a tunnel in Gaza. Israel's military said those hostages had been recently killed by Hamas. An Israeli official said that I believe with the health service, said that Israel believed they had been killed between 48 and 72 hours before the military found them. I believe that was somebody with the health ministry who said that. That has sparked finding these 6 hostages dead in Gaza, who had just recently been killed by Hamas, has sparked criticism of the Biden administration's Gaza ceasefire strategy and ratcheted up pressure on Netanyahu from Israelis to bring the remaining hostages home. Asked whether he thought Netanyahu was doing enough to reach a hostage deal today, Biden said no. He did not elaborate on his remarks. Biden appeared to push back today when asked, Netanyahu appeared to push back today when asked about Biden's comments, saying pressure should be applied to Hamas, not to Israel, particularly after the hostages' deaths. And now we are asked to show seriousness, said Netanyahu at his press conference today. We're asked to make concessions? What message does that send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, he told a news conference in Jerusalem. Netanyahu said in his news conference he did not believe Biden or anyone serious about achieving peace would ask Israel to make more concessions, and that instead it was Hamas who needed to make concessions. When Biden was asked if he was planning to present a final hostage deal to both sides this week, I don't really know what that means specifically. Biden told reporters we're very close to that. Hope springs eternal, he added, when asked if a deal would be successful. Okay. Biden's fresh criticism of Netanyahu today comes as he and Vice President Harris face increased calls for decisive action to end the nearly 11-month-old war in Gaza. The conflict has sown divisions among Democrats, with many progressives pressing Biden to restrict or at least place conditions on U.S. weapon supplies to Israel. We just talked about how the UK has announced a limitation on some arms sales to Israel. Excuse me. So hold on. Throat is too dry. Senior Israeli sources told Reuters it was remarkable that Biden was pressuring Netanyahu over a hostage deal rather than pressuring Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. They said Biden's statement that Netanyahu was not doing enough was also dangerous because it came days after Hamas executed 6 hostages, including an American. In response to the Israeli comment, a U.S. official told Reuters that while Biden had been clear that Hamas was to blame for the hostages' deaths, he is also calling for urgency from the Israeli government in securing the release of the missing remaining hostages. Senior Hamas official Sami Abu Zuri said Biden's criticism of Netanyahu was American recognition that Netanyahu was responsible for undermining efforts to reach a deal. The Hamas official said Hamas would respond positively to a proposal that could secure a permanent ceasefire and full Israeli withdrawal. Full Israeli withdrawal from the Palestinian enclave. Remember, Netanyahu wants Israeli troops to be able to remain on the Philadelphia corridor, which is a small strip of land running the entire length of Gaza on the border with Egypt. So Netanyahu is insisting that Israeli troops get to stay in Gaza, running along the entire southern border, and Netanyahu is saying that he wants. I believe he is still saying that he wants Israeli troops to also be able to stay on this other corridor. Hold on a second here. Where did I put it? Where did I put the corridor? The other thing. It's the Netzarim corridor. This one. The Netzarim corridor, which is a couple miles, I think it's 2.5 miles wide now, strip of land that runs the entire length of Gaza from east to west. So Netanyahu wants Israeli troops to be able to stay in those 2 parts of Gaza, even under a ceasefire. Okay? And hold on a second here. And just to finish what I was reading you, and we'll take some more comments. So Hamas wants a full Israeli withdrawal, whereas Netanyahu is now insisting that Israeli troops get to stay in these two parts of Gaza. And Reuters says that Netanyahu, sorry, let me just pull this up here just to finish this, and then I'll take some comments from you guys. Just to finish this article for Reuters. Netanyahu, who has accused Hamas of obstructing any agreement, said over the weekend that whoever murders hostages does not want a deal. Israeli protesters took to the streets for a second day today, and the largest trade union launched a general strike to press the Israeli government to reach a deal to return the hostages. Okay, so what do you think about this? What do you think about Biden saying today that Netanyahu is not doing enough to secure a hostage deal? Some public criticism of Netanyahu by Biden today. What do you think about that? Well, I will take some comments from you on this. By the way, one of our viewers, Sonic Teal, asked if there were any clashes in Jenin today. I wasn't watching the Jenin cam all day, and I wasn't keeping up with Jenin all day. I have not heard reports of intense clashes in Jenin today, but I also wasn't really keeping up on it. So I can't say for sure on that, but I haven't heard reports of it. Let's see here. One of our viewers, Cogito, asked if those two corridors are roads. So the Philadelphia corridor, I believe I've seen a picture of it where it is paved, but I'm not sure what the deal it is right now. The Philadelphia corridor is about 100 yards wide. The one that runs across the southern border of Gaza next to Egypt. I wonder if we can see it on, I bet we can see it on Google Maps. You know that? I bet if I do this, why didn't I think of this before? If we zoom in, can we see it there? Well, it's kind of hard to see where exactly it is. But there's Rafah. I don't know if it's this or something. I don't know if it's all paved, the Philadelphia corridor. It might be. But you can see there's Gaza and there's Egypt. So there is this area. I don't know which exactly of this is the Philadelphia corridor. There's a big wall there. But I can't tell. I don't know exactly. I'll have to look it up. See if I can find more pictures of it. Hans Kruger says it is paved. Hold on. Oh, now Yal says Israel just paved it. Maybe some of it was paved before. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is right now. And then that other corridor, the Netzarim corridor, this one here, which runs across the middle of Gaza, that is 4 kilometers wide. That corridor splits the strip into the northern zone and the southern zone. It's a zone of occupation that Israel has set up in the Gaza Strip during the war. Satellite imagery in March showed a 4-mile-long, partially paved road had been constructed within that corridor. Approximately 1.2 miles of the road consists of pavement that existed prior to the Israel-Hamas war, with Israel clearing a path through the entire width of the strip. Yeah, Israel brought bulldozers in, and I know they bulldozed a bunch of stuff. The IDF also repaired portions of that were destroyed by armored vehicles and reinforced it with multiple lanes for various types of military vehicles. Satellite imagery in May showed new pavement had been laid over gravel roads. Okay, so it looks like a lot or all of this is paved. Israel considers this region where their troops now are essential for carrying out raids in northern and central Gaza, as well as securely channeling aid into the region. That is from Netzarim Corridor Wikipedia article. Okay, that's a different one than the corridor running along the south of Gaza. Okay. Can you look for the new third corridor north of Netzarim? I'm not aware of that, Lizzie Z. I'm sorry. Hold on a second here. Hang on one sec. Yeah, so look, this is an article from today. Massive protests hit Israel after 6 hostages killed in Gaza, from Reuters. Look what it says down here. On Sunday, the chief Hamas negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, based in Qatar, said Hamas will not sign an agreement with Israel for a ceasefire and hostage return unless Israel fully withdrew from Gaza Strip, including both the Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors, issues that have been sticking points in the talks. So again, Israel wants to keep troops in both of those strips of land in Gaza, even after a ceasefire. Karp says Israel will not withdraw the troops from there. But that's still a current demand. Okay, hold on a second here. Hang on a moment. Hang on a moment here. Oh, there's the whole other thing here. Did we talk about this? So much stuff to talk about here. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. Oh, I have some analysis I want to show you about the situation. Hey, thanks Sonic Teal for your support. I really appreciate it, Sonic Teal. Thank you. And also Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo says, Israel could be negotiating. Instead, they are trying to rescue the hostages. Messed up. If they weren't trying to rescue, the hostages would still be alive. That's what Bilbo thinks. Thank you, Bilbo. Thank you also, IndyCar, for your support. IndyCar says, a nation's leaders must make the decisions for every citizen when only a few are at risk. We get angry when the outcome is far from their families' desires. Pray for the leaders to choose wisely for all. So I think what Indy is saying is that he thinks maybe that Netanyahu is doing what Netanyahu thinks is best for the country as a whole, instead of the hostages specifically. I think that's what Indy is saying. Thank you also, Lisa Sutz, who says, is Iran still planning to attack Israel? As far as I'm aware, Iran is. It's just not clear. Iran has said they're going to attack Israel in some way. It hasn't happened yet. We'll have to see. They haven't said they're not going to. So we'll have to see what happens there. It has not happened yet. I mean, I haven't heard about it much lately. Let me check something here. Oh, look at this. So this is from the Institute for the Study of War, which I really like. You can find them at understandingwar.org. They do a lot of really good military analysis on various conflicts around the world. And this is their update for today from the Iran update. But look down here. Iranian Supreme National Defense University President, Brigadier General Esmail Ahmadi Moghadam, said today that keeping Israel in a state of anxiety is no less than a military strike. He claimed that Iran will have a wise reaction to what they say was Israel's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas political leader, in Tehran several weeks ago. So he claimed that Iran will have a wise reaction to Ismail Haniyeh's death. His statements are consistent with those from senior Iranian officials discussing Iran's, quote, psychological war against Israel. He is not within the Iranian chain of command, but his statements are representative of the larger ongoing public conversation in Iranian defense and security circles discussing the merits of employing psychological warfare against Israel. Okay, so this is still something that they have said they're going to do. They have not said they're not going to do it, but it hasn't happened yet. All right. Oh, thanks, by the way, to Ivan for the gift memberships. Thank you also, Allie B. from Tennessee, for your support. I appreciate that. And also Kim Richels. Do you think Iran will strike immediately after the peace talks fail, says Kim? I don't really know how, if Iran's not striking is related to the peace talks. I mean, it's been kind of strange in that, remember like a week or two ago, there was that incident where Israel says it conducted a preemptive strike on Hezbollah, which is an Iran-supported group in Lebanon, which also said it was going to attack Israel for an assassination of the Hezbollah top commander. So Israel said that it launched Israel launched these airstrikes where Israel said that Hezbollah was going to launch all these rockets and maybe some missiles into Israel, and Israel destroyed a bunch of them. And then Hezbollah right after that launched, like, I want to say a couple hundred rockets into Israel or something like that. Like, it wasn't like a huge attack. And then Hezbollah said that they might still respond further, but it was not a big attack. So I don't know if that whole thing, like, did that make Iran? Did that make, because I believe some people thought that might have been a sign to Iran, like, hey, Iran, if you're going to attack us, we will do a preemptive strike on you like we did on Hezbollah. I don't know. So I don't know if that changed their calculation. I don't know if they're waiting for peace talks to play out. I don't know maybe they haven't figured out what to do. Maybe they think, well, if we just launch a bunch of missiles and rockets, if we just launch a bunch of missiles and drones like we did in April, and it'll be this big failure, and Israel and the allies will shoot them all down, and that just makes us look bad. So maybe we shouldn't do that. So maybe we should do something else. I can't tell you what their thinking is. I don't know. I don't know what they're planning on doing and when that might happen. But their official position is they're still going to do something. It's an interesting question. I just don't know what to tell you. Thank you, Yo-Yo, for your support. Yo-Yo is praying for peace. Also, certainly if I hear updates on that, I will certainly let you know. Troy Dodd thinks Nasrallah, a leader of Hezbollah, proved they chickened out. Let's see here. Susie Iris thinks there's no way Iran won't retaliate. Matter of time, waiting for the moment. That's what Susie thinks. But why are there like reactions on? I see like hearts in the. Usually I have the live reactions turned off in the chat on YouTube, and sometimes accidentally I leave them on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they're not supposed to be on. Sorry about that. Because I appreciate it, but it can get distracting for people in the chat. So I normally have them off. Okay. Thanks, by the way, to Lloyd Christmas for subscribing on Twitch, and Old Dude Mike for your support on Twitch. Old Dude Mike says, I trust Israel to do the right thing and Hamas to do the wrong thing. Thank you also, Table Tens, for your support on Twitch, and Rock Canada for your support on Twitch, and Bayou Boy TV. Let's see here. Trollo Lowland on Twitch thinks the longer it takes for Iran to respond, the bigger you might expect it to be. Sandy thinks they'll probably wait until Kamala wins the election. I don't know if what they think about the U.S. election, but who knows? Maybe they'll wait until after the U.S. election. I Rule All says, it's amazing what Israel has to deal with when a couple hundred rockets is not considered not that big of a deal. Well, I mean, in the big scheme of things, given what the usual attacks are by Hezbollah on Israel, 200 rockets was not seen. And again, I'm not aware of any real significant damage caused by this 200 or 250 rockets when they were launched. It's not seen, and given the scope of things Hezbollah could have done, it is not seen as like a very big attack on Israel. All right, let's talk about some more stuff from today. Yeah, I want to kind of go back and just kind of get an overall sense of where we stand with these negotiations. Nicolette Parker says, it does make you question whether Bibi is stringing this out until the November election. Because she thinks Trump would be more supportive, maybe, of his position? Nicolette, possibly? Oh, also, Robert Rial said the brief strike was found to be illegal. There was that thing, the strike today, the general strike was supposed to go till 6 p.m., I think, local time. But then some board in Israel said it had to end by like 2:30, I think. Let me just see if I can find something about that real quick. Hold on. I got to look it up. Is it here? Hold on. I'm sure I can find something about it somewhere. Yeah, so like the Jerusalem Post reported that the National Labor Court in Israel ruled that the general strike launched by Israel's largest labor union was illegal. And I think maybe because it's... yes, so the Jerusalem Post says this court in Israel said that since the strike was a protest and not related to workers' rights, it had to be coordinated in advance and lasted for a limited period of a few hours. Okay. So the court said that this type of strike, which is a political protest in nature, needs to be more limited than it was today. Okay. And it needed to be planned farther in advance, according to the Jerusalem Post, just to be clear. All right, let's go here. Let's get a summary of hang on a second here. Let's get a little summary of what's going on. I want to read you a little summary and talk about it with you for people who join the stream late, because I know some people join after we're on the air. And a quick thanks to Yo-Yo for the gift memberships. That's really nice of you, Yo-Yo. Thank you. And Russell Bach. Russell, thanks for your support. I'm not aware of huge fighting in Jenin today like there was the last, in previous days. But I'm not sure about that. So maybe if I get a chance, I'll check up on that. But again, I'm not aware of reports of major fighting in Jenin today. But I don't know for sure because I wasn't really all on it today. I'd have to look it up. Anyways, let's get back to the hostages situation. It's a little bit of an aside, so I'm going to focus on the hostages thing right now. Oh, and thanks to Ron Dykeman for the gift memberships. Thank you, Ron. And Crypto King, thanks for Crypto King for your support. And Ronald came as well. And also, shout out to our moderators. We have Linda Belk and Larry moderate for us on X. BZ is moderating right now. Thank you, BZ. Really appreciate it. Sabrina, thank you. Cynthia Moon, thank you. And we have... over on Facebook, Charlotte Webb, Ronald Egnor, Raven Lynn, and on Twitch, our moderators, Sarah is moderating there right now. Thanks, Sarah. And okay, let's look at this. Let's get a little summary of things for people who might have joined the stream late. So, as I mentioned, trying out some content for the Washington Post, and this is a Washington Post kind of a general summary article. We can go through and talk about it, just summarizing what the state of play is with some analysis in it. Israelis stage mass protest, general strike as hostages laid to rest. Remember, Sunday, obviously the hostages was a big issue in Israel as it is, but things have really come. The pressure and tension has increased because on Sunday, 6 hostages were found dead. These 6 people, from this AP article you can see, 6 hostages were found in a tunnel in Rafah, Gaza. They had been killed apparently within 48 to 72 hours. They had been before the Israeli military found them. 2 to 3 days before they were found by the Israeli military, they were killed by Hamas, and so they were alive until a few days ago, and that has caused a large number of people to go out in Israel and protest and say that the government is not doing enough to get a ceasefire deal done and bring the rest of the hostages home. There are roughly 100 Israeli hostages still in Gaza, Hamas taken hostage by Hamas, and about a third of those hostages are believed to be dead. So roughly 60 or so believed to be alive, and around a third believed to be dead, still in Gaza. So, Netanyahu did a press conference today, so we'll talk about that. I really want to get the source of that statement. I keep saying the 48 to 72 hours thing. Yes, the Israeli Health Ministry said that they believe that the hostages had been killed between 48 and 72 hours before they were found. Okay. And the Israeli Health Ministry also said that they had been killed by they had been shot multiple times at close range. The Times of Israel reported that. I believe it was reported elsewhere as well. Hang on a second here. Yes, the Times of Israel said, the health ministry said an examination done of the bodies in Israel showed that the hostages had been shot multiple times from close range, meaning they were executed. Okay, so let's just kind of get a general sense of where everything is. You can see here, Israelis stage mass protest, general strike as hostages laid to rest. thousands of Israelis over 2 days staged the largest anti-government demonstration since October 7th. Taking to the streets and joining a general strike today, it brought much of the country to a halt as the last of the 6 hostages recovered from Gaza over the weekend was laid to rest. Again, this is a Washington Post article. The killings of the 6 hostages sent shock waves throughout Israel, igniting fury among hostage families and their hundreds of thousands of supporters who have for months accused Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu of torpedoing a deal in favor of his political interests. Remember, some say that Netanyahu is protecting himself. He is only in power as prime minister because he has the support of some right-wing parties in Israel. And some believe that these right-wing parties would not support him anymore if he reached a ceasefire deal, and that Netanyahu is basically not doing a ceasefire deal so he can stay in power. Let's see here. In a rare... there have been it's now over 330 days that the remaining hostages have been in Hamas captivity. In a rare hour-long televised news conference tonight, Netanyahu said he was sorry he was unable to bring the 6 hostages home alive, but insisted that the Israeli military would remain along the strategic Philadelphia corridor on the Gaza-Egypt border, a demand that many say has delayed the conclusion of a deal that would involve the release of hostages. Again, Netanyahu is insisting that Israeli troops be allowed to stay, even if there's a ceasefire, that Israeli troops will be allowed to stay all along the southern border of Gaza, where it meets Egypt. So even under a ceasefire, he wants there to be Israeli troops all along the border here, and he wants Israeli troops to be able to stay on the Netzarim corridor, which is a roughly 2.5-mile wide strip that Israel has taken over during the war that runs right through Gaza. He is saying that even with a ceasefire, he wants Israeli forces to remain in those 2 places. Okay? Netanyahu said Israeli withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor along the border with Egypt after the killing of the hostages would send Hamas a message: murder more hostages and you'll get more concessions. The Prime Minister's comments came at the end of a day of mourning and amid calls for the government to make a deal to bring home the nearly 100 hostages that remain in Gaza. The father of one of the hostages who was killed, Hirsch Goldman, who's also an American citizen, he was a dual American-Israeli citizen, I believe, Israeli-American, Hirsch Goldberg Poland. His father said he hoped that maybe, just maybe, his son's death is the fuel that will bring home the remaining hostages. Earlier today, thousands of workers joined an hours-long national strike that crippled transportation systems, prompted medical staff to reduce hospitals to emergency services, and shuttered businesses across the country in solidarity with demonstrators blocking highways. They called for Netanyahu to step down. Now, the strike isn't supposed to continue after today, by the way. Though President Biden has repeatedly said a deal to secure the release of the hostages was within reach, Netanyahu has insisted on maintaining an Israeli presence along the Philadelphia corridor, which Israel says is used by Hamas to smuggle weapons from Egypt into Gaza. On Monday, when Biden was asked if Netanyahu was doing enough to secure a hostage deal, Biden said no. Biden and Harris met today with the U.S. hostage team to discuss the best way to move forward on a final take-it-or-leave-it proposal the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt plan to present to Israel and Hamas potentially as soon as this week, according to a senior administration official. So I guess what's going to happen is the U.S. and Qatar and Egypt, who've been acting as mediators, are going to present sometime soon some final proposal. Is it really final? I don't know. But they're calling it a final take-it-or-leave-it proposal. What will that be? I don't know. Okay, let me just skip down here. Oh, the strike, the general strike today ended hours earlier than expected when Israel's National Labor Court, responding to government complaints, ruled in the afternoon that the work stoppage was a political activity and not legitimate labor action. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Here, the largest hostage, I think it's the largest hostage family umbrella group, has long accused Netanyahu of catering to his hawkish far-right supporters instead of making a ceasefire deal happen. Israelis are divided between those who want the war in Gaza to continue until Hamas is, quote, destroyed, a goal that military leaders have said publicly is unrealistic, and those who say getting the hostages home alive should be the first priority. Okay? Let's see here. Organizers called for more street demonstrations Monday evening. All right. So what do you guys think? Let me just take some comments on where we're at with all of this. What do you generally feel about where we're at in this? I'll take a few comments from you guys at Lookner on X. Uncle Floyd GG says when Bibi says Hamas, he means Gaza and he wants it erased. Bry M says there can't be a deal that endangers many more Israelis and IDF soldiers. Why can't people get this through their head? Smooth Blue thinks Hamas doesn't want anything but chaos. They are no different than ISIS. Ron Kubi says Israel must stop being apologetic for what they do. They need to stand strong. Sunset Dreamer says Israel left Gaza in 2005, then Gaza elected Hamas. Result was October 7th. Gaza has forfeited any rights they have now. Sheila S. says, Bibi is done. I hope Madam President will stop supplying Bibi with so many weapons and money next year, which is why he wants to start a war to prevent VP winning. His plot will not work. Gucci Noodle says what does Hamas want to stop all of this nonsense? Well, supposedly Hamas wants a complete withdrawal of Israel forces from Gaza, not some leftover. They want the return of a number of prisoners, many prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. What else do they want? I have something here. Now, there's a question as to whether Hamas would really make a deal, by the way. There's a question about that as well. So I can't say for sure that they would agree to a deal, because some think that, like, you know, that they're not being honest about this. Let's see if I can find any analysis of that. That's a whole other issue. But they definitely don't want Israeli troops to be still in Gaza. Let's see if I can find out something about this. I got to check a couple things here. Oh, so here's an article here. Let's see. Okay, so there's a recent article from AP. Two sworn enemies hold the key to ending the war in Gaza. Does either man want a deal? Any deal requires the signatures of two men, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who is believed to be in hiding in Gaza. Israel wants him killed. They are sworn enemies and tough negotiators that know the outcome of the talks will profoundly shape their legacies. In Sinwar's case, it could mean life or death. Both have strong incentives to end the war, but they may also think they stand to gain by holding out a bit longer, and that war is preferable to a deal that falls short of their demands. Here's a look at the two leaders and the constraints they face. Okay, let's look at this for a second. Netanyahu has promised total victory over Hamas and the return of all the hostages held in Gaza, goals many believe are incompatible, that you can't get both of those things. He has come under tremendous pressure from hostages' families and much of the Israeli public to make a deal to bring the hostages home, even if it leaves a battered Hamas intact. The U.S. is also pushing for such a deal. But Netanyahu's governing coalition relies on far-right ministers who want to permanently reoccupy Gaza. So far-right ministers who literally want Israel to go back into Gaza and permanently occupy it. And these far-right ministers have threatened to bring down the government if he concedes too much. I believe there's a couple of them who are the leader of parties in the far right. They would, and so the idea is if Netanyahu makes a ceasefire deal and it concedes too much, they have threatened to bring down the government. That would force early elections that could drive Netanyahu from power at a time when he is on trial for corruption. It would also speed up a broader reckoning over the security failures surrounding the October 7th attack, which happened on Netanyahu's watch. Netanyahu has rejected calls for a government investigation of the security failures until the war is over. So having the war go on delays an investigation into what maybe the Netanyahu government did wrong in the security setup that allowed October 7th to happen, and it possibly keeps Netanyahu in power. Also, the longer the war drags on, says AP, the more likely Israel is to achieve something that looks like victory. The killing of Sinwar, for example, the rescue of more hostages, and the longer Netanyahu has to repair his political standing and reshape his legacy. But it also comes with risks as the number... Now this is interesting because this article was written on August 28th, and this article was written before those 6 hostages were found killed. So it's saying, look, the longer the war goes on and there's no ceasefire deal, it can be good for Netanyahu, but it also comes with risks. Well, one of the risks just happened a couple days after this article was written, because 6 hostages were found dead and they had just been killed by Hamas. So that's one of the risks, is that the war keeps going on, hostages are not brought home, and it turns up that they're dead and they were just killed. So right there, that's an illustration of one of the risks of keeping, to Netanyahu, to his political standing. I mean, obviously obviously it is completely awful that the hostages themselves were killed. So the point here is not to dehumanize the hostages and talk about them in purely political terms. But what the article is talking about is that there are political considerations here. So I don't mean to be I'm sure the article does not mean to be saying that the only importance of the hostages is in terms of political terms. That's obviously not the case. I just want to clarify that. But it is an important political consideration here. Okay? Netanyahu, this is actually a very interesting article, so I'm reading. I know it's a lot of me reading the article, but I actually think this article is very interesting in talking about the motivations of Netanyahu, and I assume of Sinwar, in their negotiation. And we've been talking about the negotiation. What does Netanyahu want? Why is there no ceasefire deal? So I want to keep reading it because I think it's very interesting. And it's not that much longer. But Netanyahu has clashed with his own defense, and this is an AP article, by the way. Netanyahu has clashed with his own defense minister over the endgame here. Israeli media is filled with reports quoting unnamed senior security officials expressing frustration with Netanyahu, especially his demand for lasting control over 2 strategic corridors in Gaza. Some have gone so far as to accuse him of sabotaging the talks. Again, he wants Israeli troops to stay in Gaza permanently, even with a ceasefire, on a line running across the border with Egypt and a line running right through the middle of Gaza, right through the middle of the territory. Both Israel and Hamas say they have accepted different versions of an evolving U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal in principle, while suggesting changes and accusing the other of making unacceptable demands. The head of a local think tank in Israel, Yohanan Plesner, acknowledged the anger directed at Netanyahu in the local press and among segments of Israeli society, but said Sinwar bore most of the blame for the impasse because he had shown little interest in compromising. Plesner said if we saw Sinwar was serious about getting a deal, that would force Israel and Netanyahu to expose their cards. He said the current negotiation is almost like negotiating with oneself. Again, this article was written before the 6 hostages were found. With your understanding, I'm going to read a little more of this because there's another section here. What does Sinwar want? What does Sinwar want? Why would Sinwar, he is the leader of Hamas, who is really maybe the last, I believe he is the last person that was at the top of Israel's want list after October 7th that was still alive. I think he's the top person. He was one of the few top people. There's Mohammed Deif, who's the military commander of Hamas, and he has been killed by Israel. There was also, now I don't know if he was right at the top of the list, but Israel also is believed to have assassinated the political head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran a few weeks ago. But Sinwar is right at the top. He may have always been at the top, but he's always been right at the top of that list. But he's still alive. He's believed to be hiding in Gaza. So what does he want? Sinwar wants to end the war, but only on his terms. Says AP, Israel's offensive has killed over 40,000 people, according to local health officials, displaced 90% of Gaza's population. So most of Gaza, most of the 2 million or so people in Gaza are no longer in their homes because of the war, and destroyed its main cities. Hamas has lost thousands of Hamas fighters and much of its militant infrastructure. Sinwar's only bargaining chips, look at this. Sinwar's only bargaining chips, says AP, are the roughly 110 hostages still in Gaza, around a third of whom are believed to be dead. And it's 6 more of them dead now because this article was written a few days ago before the 6 dead hostages were found. And he needs much more than a temporary pause in the fighting if he hopes to salvage anything resembling victory from the October 7th attack that he helped mastermind. That begins with assurances that Israel won't resume the war once some or all of the hostages are freed. So Sinwar doesn't want it to be the case that Hamas gives up the hostages and then Israel says, okay, we're attacking you again. He also needs Israel to withdraw from all of Gaza to ensure that the lasting impact of the October 7th attack is not a permanent reoccupation of the territory. That includes the Philadelphia corridor running along the south of Gaza that Netanyahu says they want to stay in. The release of the high-profile Palestinian prisoners as part of a deal is a sacred cause for Sinwar, who was himself a long-serving prisoner freed in exchange. And he needs assurances that Palestinians will be able to return to their homes and rebuild them. Sinwar is very much concerned with bringing negotiations to a conclusion, whether with regard to a ceasefire or an exchange of prisoners, because in both cases, Sinwar will have come out as the winner, says Nabi Awada, a Lebanese political analyst and former militant who spent years in an Israeli prison with Sinwar. There are risks for Sinwar in drawing the talks out. More hostages are likely to die or be rescued, which has happened after this article was written. 6 hostages were found dead as the war grinds on. Death, destruction, and hardship in Gaza will continue and could stoke Palestinian discontent with Hamas, with political implications down the line. Sinwar himself, who sits atop Israel's most wanted list, which I was saying, could be killed at any time. That's a risk for Sinwar. But given the centrality of martyrdom in Hamas's history and ideology, he may feel that outcome is inevitable and preferable to a deal that looks like defeat. How about that? Anyways, so this article talks about how both Netanyahu and Sinwar have reasons to want to hold out for a better deal, but there's also a risk to them in holding out for a better deal. It's a difficult situation, and they have not been able to reach a deal now, 11 months? Well, actually, yes, almost 11 months after October 7th. So, very interesting article from Associated Press, just giving you some sense of the different negotiating positions on the different sides. So I know, because we've done polls, that you guys are generally, at least in the chat, very pessimistic that there will be a deal. Most of you think there's not going to be a deal. I'll take a few more comments about what you think about this now, but as to the question of why Hamas wouldn't just want to make a deal, well, it is interesting that, first of all, there is this question of do they want to give the hostages back at all because it's such an important bargaining chip for them. But I think a very important part of that article is saying that, remember, Sinwar, who's the leader of Hamas, his only bargaining chips are the hostages. Once those hostages get returned to Israel, there goes your big bargaining power. So Sinwar, while he has these hostages, is going to want to do whatever, is going to want to squeeze the maximum deal. And I assume he'd like to stay alive. I assume he would like Hamas to stay in power in Gaza, right? So, and you can understand why he would be uncomfortable with a deal that allows Israel to have all these forces remaining in Gaza, having forces remain on the southern border of Gaza with Egypt. And also, don't forget about the Netzarim corridor, where a roughly 2.5-mile strip of land running across all of Gaza, roughly from west to east, from northwest to southeast, that Israel currently controls. So it won't look very good for Sinwar if he makes a deal and you have all these Israeli troops occupying significant parts of Gaza. So, whatever you think of Sinwar, I think you could understand how that he would not want to do that. I don't, certainly you can see that there are obstacles to an agreement here. Yes, as Bondab says, that northern corridor is the Netzarim corridor. It's interesting, in a lot of the coverage I see the Philadelphia corridor talked about, which is that southern corridor running across the south part of Gaza, that small strip of land running along the Egypt border. But the Netzarim corridor is important too. Hey, by the way, thanks to Yo-Yo. Wow, Yo-Yo gave 50 of you people, 50 of the viewers, memberships in YouTube. That's really generous of you, Yo-Yo. Actually, more. Yo-Yo gave, I think, about 80 of you. Wow, that's really generous. So thanks so much, Yo-Yo. That's really kind of you. I really appreciate your support for the channel. Make sure if somebody gives you a gift membership or a gift subscription, maybe on Twitch, to thank them for it. So thank you, Yo-Yo. That's really nice of you. Thanks also to our new member, Maisie. Thanks for your support, Capitalist88. Thanks to David Spivak. I appreciate that. And Ron Dykman for the gift memberships, and also Russell Bach. And look, so this is why, just as a quick aside here, I mentioned to you guys that I have this deal now with AP and Reuters for articles where I pay them for articles, and for like the last year or so I have paid AFP and Reuters for live news footage. And you might say, well, why are you paying for articles? Well, I think a lot of these articles are actually really helpful. A lot of this content is actually it goes a bit deeper, and it allows us to discuss these things in depth. And I'm trying out the Washington Post now too, but your support is what allows me to purchase the content. So I appreciate that. But that's why I do it, because I think it's very helpful to get a better understanding of what's going on and to bring to you guys. And by the way, for those who say, well, why don't you just take the footage and show it, or take the articles and read it? You can't do that. You can't steal somebody else's news content and use it on your own news channel. So it's one thing to say, news provider X is reporting that Netanyahu is doing a speech in 2 hours. That's different. That's like you're relaying their news report. But you can't just show their live video or read their whole article. It doesn't work that way. So if we're going to have that kind of content, I need to purchase it. But I'm happy to do it because I think it's really helpful for the news coverage and for you guys. Okay. Let me read some comments from you. What do you think about these negotiations going forward? Okay, let's see. Let me read some more comments here. And thank you again, Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo, I appreciate that. And all the other people for your support. Oh, and also Old Dude Mike, thanks for your support on Twitch. Really appreciate it, Old Dude Mike. Yeah, I said you people, I meant you viewers. You people sounds kind of strange. Let's see here. Dave DW says, I wish Israel all the best, but I'm sick of paying. I wish Israel all the best, but I'm sick of paying for them, Dave DW says. He says, and I'm sick of my non-interventionist beliefs being called anti-Semitic. It's all getting very old. Crispy, our viewer, thinks with the U.S. election year, there will be a deal no matter what the outcome is, and I don't want anybody to get hurt or a war. So, look, as we said, Biden came out today and he criticized Netanyahu publicly. There you see the headline right there. He was asked if Biden would, that's a Reuters headline there. Biden says Netanyahu not doing enough to secure hostage deal. Now, look, I don't doubt that Biden genuinely wants an end to the fighting. I think he wants that. But also, I think that it could be problematic for Democrats in the election if there's clearly part of the Democratic Party that doesn't support the Israeli war in Gaza and wants that to end. So, that could have a political impact if there is still war going on we're getting close to the election, just in a couple of months, basically. I think that politically, if you put them on the spot, you might get Democratic political operatives saying, yeah, it might be good for Biden or for Harris, who's running, if there was a ceasefire deal before the election. But I don't know. But I mean, I don't think it's a small thing for Biden to publicly be critical of Netanyahu like this. Literally the day after 6 Israeli hostages were found dead. All right, hold on. Let me read a couple more comments here from you guys. Murph says, do you think Qatar should be charged with harboring terrorists and funding Hamas with millions on a regular basis, along with allowing terrorist organizations such as ISIS, etc.? All right, so I'm not an expert on Qatar. I will say this. So Qatar does act as a middleman in negotiations. I know they position themselves as a middle person. So, and look, they do allow, I know, some leaders of Hamas to live there, and they have also provided some support for Gaza under its leadership by Hamas. I think Qatar might suggest that they are trying to like be helpful by not taking too much of a side either way. That's a different topic. It's an interesting topic. I don't know if I can find something quick on that, but I believe they position themselves as like a neutral party. And they might say, well, there's helpfulness to be gotten from having that, from having a party that has relations with both sides and that can talk with both sides. Let me see if I can find you. I don't know if on a spur of a moment if I could find you something about that. So like there is a Washington Post article from like a year ago, which says how the war in Gaza has shaped Qatar's role as a regional mediator. This is from last year. And in that article, they talk about how Qatar over the years has leveraged its extensive diplomatic relationships to negotiate. They have relationships with Hamas and the Taliban and Russia, along with countries like the U.S., and they've used that to help negotiate delicate issues during international conflicts. Okay? They were integral in facilitating the agreement last November that got a bunch of hostages brought back to Israel, for example. And then in this, I'll post a link to the article if you want to read it. The post in this article talks about how playing this diplomatic role has allowed Qatar to help its global standing and distinguish itself from regional rivals. So it's a whole interesting topic about how Qatar plays this mediation role. But again, you know, my general point, without being an expert on Qatar, and I'll post a link to the Qatar article in the chat in case you want to check it out more fully. But my point is that, you know, to someone who says, Qatar, how can you let Hamas leaders live in Qatar? I think they would say something like, well, it's important to have countries that can play that mediation role. And it can help, you know, reach an agreement like was reached in November to bring some of the hostages home. So I'm just saying that might be something they say in response to that. But it's an interesting topic. Thank you so much, Mr. Blanks-a-lot, for your support. Thank you, Walter, who says, love the articles. Thank you, Walter. I appreciate that. Thank you. Also, Bob Piffle. Thanks so much, Bob, for your support. And Chris Brinkman. Thank you, Chris, for your support, too. Let's see here. And thanks to Dude Go Sauce, who gave out some gift subs on Twitch. Very nice of you, Dude Go Tea Sauce. Also, Al Yat Sion for subscribing on Twitch. Thanks for your support over there. Old Dude Mike for subscribing over there. And let's see here. Hold on a moment here. I just want to also check. I haven't checked the news in a minute. Just want to make sure I'm not missing any big updates here. No one has mentioned it in the chat. You know, I saw a post from Joe Truzman. I should maybe if I have time, I'll read that. That's an interesting post. I might read for you. I'm checking some of the messages people have sent me as well. Bear with me for a second here. Hang on a moment here. Stephen 2024, our viewer, says the framework was agreed to by Israel and Hamas in July. However, there were still issues to be worked out. I don't know if they're going to be able to work their issues out. I am Jonathan, our viewer. Says, I really hope they have a ceasefire because I really think it may sway the election. So I think I am Jonathan might think, maybe I am Jonathan thinks that I'm interpreting this as I am Jonathan thinking that if there's a ceasefire, that could help Harris win. I mean, it could be a very close election. I mean, the signs are it's going to be a very close election. So anything that sways a few votes could sway the election. I don't know. Our viewer, Bradley Woods, sorry it took me so long to get to your comment, Bradley. Our viewer, Bradley Woods, wrote in and said, Israel needs to have a presence in Gaza after a ceasefire. Otherwise, they are under no form of government. Their former government leader was Hamas. Hamas cannot be allowed to remain in power. Thank you, Bradley Woods, for writing in. Okay. Let's see here. Thank you, Aaron Dooley, our member. And also, hey, Mr. Blanks a lot. That's really nice of you. That's really generous of you. Thanks so much for your support, Mr. Blanks a lot. Thank you. Oh, one of our viewers just pointed out there's some rocket alerts. What are they, in northern Israel? These do periodically happen, by the way, rocket alerts. So I'll just mention that. We have here, hang on a moment. We have here, let me pull it up. I have too much open. Yeah, these are in northern Israel. These are sirens in northwestern Israel. You know what? I don't know if anything happened on this stream. I actually have a live shot from the area. I don't know if anything happened a couple minutes ago on the stream. I don't see anything there right now. I'll pull it up here real quick. This is from Reuters. That's the border. I'd have to go back and see. Give me a second, I'll check. I can't go back right now. I'm not aware yet. So, hang on. So what you're looking at is the Lebanon, it's the Israel border with Lebanon. And that is that's the western part of the border. Gas on the Brain says that's Nahariya. That's what Gas on the Brain says, which might be correct. But the sirens were in that rough area. I don't know. I don't. I haven't looked at this in a while. I don't remember exactly where that. Exactly where those. I don't know if I ever figured out exactly where this camera was, but it's in northwestern Israel. So but I don't see. At least at the moment, there's nothing going on here. And I haven't seen any reports of interceptions yet or anything like that. So, but it's possible I missed. It's possible I might have missed like an interceptor going up in the air or something. I will do a quick check on Telegram and see here if I see anything. Yeah, right now all I'm seeing is just reports about the rocket alerts, and I have not seen any reports about interceptions or rockets landing or anything like that. So that's all I've seen so far. So we'll keep that up there for a second. That is the give me 1 sec, guys. That's the Israel-Lebanon group. Oops, what did I do? What did I do? Okay, that's that. Presumably those would be rockets. If there were actually, if it wasn't a false alarm, and I'm not sure about that yet, they would be rockets launched from Lebanon. Let's see. Hang on one moment here. Oh, there was something else I had too. Give me a second. Let me just, I'm not aware, again, I think at this point, given how the rocket alerts usually work, given that the rocket sirens went off, what, like 10 minutes ago, you would have, we're not going to see, I don't think we're going to see a rocket now come in when the sirens were 10 minutes ago. Usually it's pretty fast. So I have this and I can go to it if I need it, but I'm not aware of anything really happening there right now, and I haven't heard any reports of anything. So if I hear any, I'll let you know. So I'm going to go back to me for a second. Maybe we'll just go a little bit longer here and talk a little bit more. I mean, there's going to be more developments in Israel, so we've been talking about various things, but maybe we'll go a little bit longer. There's one other thing I want to show you here, which was... by the way, Aiden, our viewer Aiden, thinks there will never be a deal on either side. That's what Aiden thinks. I just wanted to show you, so in terms of like some of the negotiating stuff, you know, where we're at with this ceasefire deal, there's some talk in this article here, hold on, by the Washington Post, which is U.S. plans to present take it or leave it Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal soon. Because, you know, again, 2 days ago, these 6 hostages were found dead in Gaza by Israel. Israel says they were killed recently by Hamas, maybe 2-3 days before the Israel found them. So there's a lot of anger in Israel at the government. Many people in Israel think the government is not moving fast enough, not doing enough to get a ceasefire deal. So you might see it as a time when maybe it's a good time for a deal to be made because there's more pressure in Israel to make a deal. I don't know. But the U.S. is planning, supposedly, according to the Washington Post, to present a take-it-or-leave-it Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal soon. So I want to just give you a little update on this. I'm not going to read the whole article, but talk about some specifics here. U.S. officials said President Biden's months-long push for a ceasefire and hostage release deal faced renewed urgency on Sunday after Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 6 hostages dead, including an Israeli American. The U.S. has been talking to Egypt and Qatar about the contours of a final take-it-or-leave-it deal that it plans to present to the parties in the coming weeks, one that, if the two sides fail to accept, could mark the end of the American-led negotiations. Wow. According to senior administration officials. Biden officials said it was not immediately clear whether the discovery of the 6 hostages would make it more or less likely that Israel and Hamas could come to an agreement in the coming weeks. The senior official said, "You can't keep negotiating this. This process has to be called at some point." The senior official, U.S. official, said that finding the 6 hostages should add additional urgency in this closing phase, which we're already in. Oh, the U.S., according to the senior official in the U.S. who talked to the Washington Post, the U.S. agrees with Israel that all 6 hostages were shot in the head and executed not long before their bodies were discovered, okay? So the Post is reporting that the U.S. has the similar assessment as Israel, that all 6 hostages were shot in the head and executed not long before their bodies were discovered. Wow, terrible. Biden and his top aides have spent several months relentlessly trying to bring Israel and Hamas to an agreement that would see the release of the remaining living hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners being released in a temporary ceasefire in Gaza that they hoped would lay the groundwork for a permanent end to the war. Fine. Inside Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing fury and increased pressure from the hostage families who are demanding that he address the nation. This article was a day ago before Netanyahu did his press conference today. Okay? Hostage families have for months accused Netanyahu of prioritizing his political survival and victory against Hamas, over a deal that would bring their loved ones home. Okay. Dennis Ross, a former American envoy in Israel, said Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, is unlikely to change his position because no one is able to exert pressure on him. But it remains to be seen whether pressure inside Israel could force Netanyahu to more seriously engage in negotiations. Okay. Okay, fine. Last week, U.S. officials were negotiating some of the final details, supposedly on a bridging proposal they put forward between Israel and Hamas to try to hash out remaining differences. The discussions last week focused primarily on which hostages would be exchanged for specific Palestinian prisoners held inside Israel, some of whom were detained without a trial. The first phase of hostages includes women, the elderly, the ill, and the wounded, a group that would have included 23-year-old Goldberg Poland, who was one of the 6 bodies who were found. His left arm had been blown off by a grenade during the October 7th attacks. 2 women who were among the 6 found, Carmel Gott and Eden Yerushalmi, whose bodies were recovered, would also have been on the list of those who would have been released in the first phase, the senior official said. Okay. Some Middle East experts said the fewer living hostages there are, and now there are 6 fewer, the less pressure will be on Netanyahu to come to a deal. U.S. officials fear that the number of living hostages remaining may only number in the dozens. This is interesting. The senior U.S. administration official that the Washington Post talked to said Hamas's decision to execute the hostages with negotiations underway calls into question Hamas's seriousness in the talks. Hamas has proven stubborn, obstinate at various points in the talks, even as Israeli officials have made concessions, the officials said. A former State Department official who helped lead Israeli-Palestinian negotiations in 2014, Frank Lowenstein, said, rhetoric aside, Netanyahu has never prioritized freeing the hostages. For now, he will be under a lot more domestic pressure to accept a ceasefire deal that saves the remaining hostages. And if Netanyahu waits this out, over time, fewer living hostages could mean fewer Palestinian prisoners to release and what he sees as a more favorable negotiating position. Wow. Both Netanyahu and Hamas have at various points been stubborn in reaching a deal. Netanyahu has come under intense criticism by the Israeli security establishment, domestic political opponents, and the hostage families for delaying the conclusion of a deal we've been talking about this, by insisting in recent months on new demands such as an indefinite Israeli military presence along the Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors, 2 strategic corridors that mark the border area between Egypt and Gaza, and a 4-mile-long road that goes right through Gaza, just south of Gaza City, that runs from east to west. Okay. This parent, a parent whose son is believed to be held by Hamas in Gaza, Enav Zangauker, criticized Netanyahu, saying that Netanyahu has decided to bury them in the rubble of his politics. His hands are covered in the blood of hostages who are being murdered in captivity. So that hostage parent wants Netanyahu to reach a deal and thinks Netanyahu is not doing enough. The Washington Post also says American Jewish groups have grappled with their private fury at Netanyahu, but have also been so far unwilling to challenge him publicly as they see him sabotaging myriad U.S. efforts at a deal, according to a person familiar with internal discussions among several organizations. Also, prominent Democrats and Republicans used the news of the killing of the 6 hostages to bolster arguments they have been making for months. Republicans argued that the discovery of the bodies highlighted why Israel must be allowed to continue its widely criticized military campaign to destroy Hamas. The Biden administration where, like Lindsey Graham said, a Republican said the Biden administration in Israel should hold Iran accountable for the fate of remaining hostages and put on the target list oil refineries in Iran if the hostages are not released. Democrats, meanwhile, said the news highlighted the urgency to reach a deal in the war and surge desperately needed humanitarian aid to the enclave. So complex, all these different players. So just wanted to talk about the negotiations for a little bit. Okay. Cheryl Simpson says, what a mess, hard choices. All right, I'm going to take a few more comments from you guys. There's so many aspects to this. It's one of these streams where I feel like we're talking about a bunch of different things. And even though we're on the stream for a while, I feel like we're just scratching the surface in a sense. I think we did more than scratch the surface, but there's certainly more that we could talk about. But I think I'm going to take a few more comments from you, and we will keep covering this as developments happen. Allistic says, very dynamic situation. Nicolette Parker says, does it come down to how much is one's life worth? Who sets the price? Apps Twitch says Washington Post, no bias here. As I said before, I do think the Washington Post does lean left. When I read articles from them, like the one I was just reading, I don't think it's like a total left-wing article. I think a lot of the stuff in there, like talking to a United States official, is just passing along something that this person had said. But at the same time, I think that they do, I think a left-wing position on this in the U.S. is, as they said in their article, is more towards a ceasefire rather than keeping the war going. But they did say in that article that the finding of the 6 bodies has led some Republicans to say this is evidence which shows why we should keep the war going, why Israel should keep the war going. Boss Lulu and more felt the article seemed balanced. It's also hard here too because, and we've talked about this, but you can talk about, there's this lens in which you can look at the negotiations when you can say, okay, what's the best thing for Israel here? Should they make a deal? Should they not make a deal? Should they give in on this thing? Should they not give in on this thing? Right? There's that way of looking at the negotiations, just from a pure, what's better for Israel, what's worse, is a hardline position on the negotiations good, or should they just be making some more concessions and getting the hostages home? So there's that way of looking at it. But there's this whole other way of looking at it, which we've talked some about on the stream, which is Netanyahu negotiating in good faith? Or does he just want there to be no deal? And he's basically just bringing up things like, we want Israeli troops on the Philadelphia corridor. We want Israeli troops to stay on that entire border, to stay on this strip of land in Gaza, on the whole border strip with Egypt. And we're not going to pull those troops out, even in a ceasefire. And we want Israeli troops to stay on this whole Netzarim corridor, this strip of a couple miles wide, which runs right through the middle of Gaza. We're not going to remove them. Is that him really arguing about what he thinks is necessary for Israel? Or is it him just trying to stay in power, trying to avoid losing the support of his right wing, trying to sabotage the negotiations? I mean, there's different schools of thought on this. And so it's a very complex situation because it's complex either of those ways you see Netanyahu. But just to remind you, there's debate about how Netanyahu is approaching all of this. Aside from the debate over Hamas, how serious they are about really completing a deal. Joe Blogs thinks Bibi will keep fighting until he is deposed. So I do think it's a legitimate argument to be had. And I see people in the chat talking about this and read the comments. And some people think, no, Israel needs to have a certain amount of forces still in Gaza, even with the ceasefire, to make sure Hamas doesn't come to power again and do another October 7th. And some people disagree with that. But that's a disagreement about the actual negotiating terms. But there's also disagreement on, does Netanyahu really have any intention at all of completing, no matter what the terms are, of making a deal? So I can't tell you what to think about that. But it's just a very complex situation. Samantha Womack thinks Netanyahu is just buying time for himself. Blue Hen thinks I'm biased on this topic. I'm not sure what I have said during this broadcast to make you think that. Wickedest Witch says, we do not know what Netanyahu's strategy is in the long run. Giuseppe K says, what is Netanyahu's endgame? Ezra Walter, our viewer, says, do you think there is a point at which Israel will give up on trying to rescue living hostages, effectively eliminating the only bargaining chip of Hamas and focus on a full-scale offensive? Well, there was that interesting point in one of those articles, which talked about, maybe in that Post article, which talked about, I don't know, it might have been an AP article, but it talked about the fewer hostages that remain, it could put less pressure on Netanyahu to make a deal. So, I mean, on the one hand, these 6 hostages got killed, which is terrible, and you might think that makes it more urgent for Netanyahu, because now it's like, now a lot of people in Israel are like, well, that could happen to the rest of the living ones soon. But if it gets to the point where there aren't that many anymore, does it become less urgent for Netanyahu to want to make concessions? I don't know, I hate even discussing it, because you hate talking about hostages in terms of the politics around it, right? And that's not what they are, and they're not just. And as I said before, to talk about the political implications of the hostages. And for example, are the pressures different on Netanyahu if there are, say, 150 hostages versus 5? That's not meant to dehumanize the hostages. It's to just at a point in time kind of realize that there are political considerations that are important. But at the same time, in discussing it that way, there is no intention of minimizing the importance of one Israeli life, in the same way there's no intention of minimizing the importance of one Palestinian life if you talk about numbers of Palestinians injured or killed. That's, of course, every one of those lives, and what happens to all of the people on both sides is important too. But just to be clear, so I want to be able to discuss these things, but at the same time, just emphasize that that's not to say that they're not important as individuals. Of course they're important as individuals on both sides. Lunali Siri says, this is a horrible and complicated situation. And look, as complicated and horrible as it is, imagine if you were in Gaza or in Israel, right? Or you had loved ones there. That would make it just more complex for you and difficult. BB thinks endless war and no peace is the fate of this region. Somebody I know who I talk to about this says that to me all the time. Their attitude is just that it's just going to keep going. Kaylee N says, how many hostages are really alive? The estimates I've seen are roughly 100 there, roughly a third, at least a third believed to be dead. But that's the estimate. The common estimate I've seen is 60 or so alive. But that could be false. Don't know. But around 100 are believed to be there. I mean, I think that is, they know how many are missing, right? So they know how many hostages were originally taken. So I think it's safe to say around 100 are there. What the dead alive numbers are, it's estimated to be about a third dead, but that could be different than that. Okay. D-Knock says, what will a ceasefire achieve for Israel? Well, without getting all into it, I mean, look, Israel, first of all, it's been affecting their economy, carrying on this war for months and months and months. Also a war on a couple fronts, because Hezbollah in Lebanon, in sympathy with the people of Gaza, has been launching these attacks on the northern border. So there's a lot of instability and fighting on the northern border with Hezbollah that has gone on. And I believe tens of thousands of Israelis, if not more, have had to move from northern Israel, where they normally would live, because of the fighting going on in the border. So presumably, if a ceasefire happened, that would ease tensions on the northern border and allow Israel to not have so many people mobilized in their forces. It would benefit their economy. It would allow people to move back to northern Israel. It would allow Israeli soldiers to not get killed in fighting. So those are some of the benefits you would have from concluding a ceasefire. Also, I don't think it's certainly for Israel. It has really strained their relations with a number of countries, including strong allies of theirs, to have this fighting going on. When other countries have seen the destruction in Gaza caused by the war, there's been a lot of harm, I think, to Israel's reputation among people in other countries. And I don't think that's a great thing for Israel that they want happening long term, right? So there's that. Look, obviously, more warfare going on, more destruction in Gaza, more hardship for people of Gaza. I don't think that's helpful in terms of in the long run for Israel. That could contribute to more people, say, joining Hamas 2.0. Could contribute to, look, West Bank. What have we seen in the West Bank the last couple of weeks? Attempted suicide attacks. 3 car bombs have been found in the West Bank the last few days. Attempted suicide attack in Tel Aviv happened a couple weeks ago. Increasing unrest in the West Bank, which is Palestinian. It's Palestinian territory on the opposite side of Israel, occupied in part by Israel, on the opposite side of Israel from the Gaza Strip. Could lead to this war continuing could continue to lead to real problems there. So there's all kinds of positives for Israel that could come out of getting this situation solved and having the war in. Okay, anyways. Susie Irish says West Bank is just amping up recruits. Mudmore thinks Israel wants to turn Gaza into the occupied West Bank. All right, guys. Oh, Mama of Six, thank you, Mama of Six. Mama of Six asked for the Discord link. Yes, there is a link. There's a link that you can use to sign up for notifications for this channel. I never know when we're going live, really. Most of the time, I don't know when we're going live. Breaking news can happen at any time. So if you don't want to miss a stream, we have a free notification system where you sign up once and you get sent a notification every time we go live. And at the same link, you can check out our Discord chat where you can chat for free in our chat with other viewers of the channel when we're not live. So the mods will post the link to the notifications, which is also the link to the Discord chat, which you can check out now in the chat room, in the chat rooms, and in the chats for this broadcast, and also in the YouTube and Facebook description for this broadcast, you can find the link for the notifications in the chat. Okay? So thank you, Mama of Six and the Strategist, for your support, who says Gaza ceasefire deal should include UN peacekeepers. That's a whole other thing if there's a ceasefire. Will there be UN or other Arab nations with who's gonna have security control in Gaza if there's a ceasefire? That's a whole other deal. How would the rebuilding go? But that's further in advance right now. That's like a latter stage of the ceasefire deal. There's this, there's an initial stage which would be somehow. It sounds like there's an initial stage that's been negotiated, which has been talked about, with some hostages getting released and some prisoners getting released. So see if at least that initial stage could even happen in a temporary ceasefire. Thank you, IndyCar, for your support, by the way, too. Who talks about the question whether Iran will get a nuclear weapon. I'm not going to get into that now, because we're about to wrap up the stream. But anyways, and whether Israel would do something about it, we're not going to get into that right now. I think it's getting to be that time, guys. This ended up being a longer stream than I thought, which is not a bad thing. It could have gone even longer because there's just so much to talk about here. But anyways, hopefully we gave you an update of what's going on, the situation, and we will certainly cover developments going forward. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in for the stream, and also a lot of people sent in comments and let me read your both in the chat and sent it to my X account and let me read your comments on the air. So I appreciate your letting me read your comments and your participation and everything. And we will certainly have more coverage on this and other developments. So subscribe and follow the channel. Subscribe and follow the channel, Agenda Free TV. We cover all kinds of live breaking news without an agenda. And follow me on X. I will post updates, news updates, when we're not on the air on my X account, which is @Lookner on X, which you can see right here. There it is. I will post there if there's updates when I'm not on the air. And I'll post a link to that in the chat. @Lookner on X. As I mentioned, sign up for the notifications for the channel. They're free. They work really well. We have a link. The Moz will post a link in the chat to that for you to sign up for the notifications. And also here, let's see. Oh, huge thanks to our moderators. They are awesome. They're always here when we're on the air. They're the reason we can have chat rooms. No chat rooms without the moderators. So huge appreciation to our moderators. Cynthia Moon on YouTube there right now. And also, we've had a number of moderators. BZ, Sarah55, Sabrina. I'm sure I'm leaving people out. Ruth Krafasi, all of our YouTube moderators who've been here tonight, thank you. Linda Belk and Larry who moderate for us on X. Ronald Egnor on Facebook. Charlotte Webb, Raven Lynn, Paul Anderson. Much thanks to our Facebook moderators and our Twitch moderators too, like Mark and NC and Sarah. Thank you. Oh, I got to read a comment, by the way. I missed a comment from Big Russ. Big Russ says, Israel has taken the high road with negotiations in the past. I'm not sure they will this time. Thank you, Big Russ96, for your support on Twitch, by the way. And Mudmore for subscribing. And Shaggy, and Clearly Crystal Clear. Did I thank all the mods? I think I did. Mark and NC and Sarah on Twitch, thank you. Yeah, and thanks everybody who donated too. That is really nice of you. I really appreciate your support for the channel. That is what allows the channel to exist. This is what allows me to get the news footage and the articles for you. So thank you so much for your support of the channel. That is very nice of you. And let's see. By the way, Ben D wrote in and said, why is it what's best for Israel? What about what is best for the Palestinians? Israel have killed over 20 that were killed, and not just for October 7th. They must live free and not in fear of dying because Israel hates them. That's what Ben says. Well, look, certainly it would be good for Gaza if there's a ceasefire, because Gaza has just been decimated. Over 90% of the people, I read you from an article before, over 90% of the people have been displaced. Much of Gaza is in ruins. Much of Gaza has been destroyed or severely damaged. I know you guys know this. So humanitarian catastrophe. So the sooner that can happen, I believe I think I've read you articles that say a UN report said it would take years to build Gaza, if not longer. Maybe decades, definitely years to rebuild, but possibly longer. So yeah, that's obviously something that it lends urgency to this, and it's a really sad situation. You have over 2 million people living there. It's terrible. So I thank you for bringing that up. There's an article, a Reuters article from May that says the UN says, the headline is Gaza needs minimum 16 years to rebuild lost homes. And the start of that Reuters article is rebuilding Gaza's shattered homes will take until at least 2040, but could drag on for many decades, according to a UN report. That was from May. Anyways, so it's just, this is a UN assessment. Anyways, thanks to Donna Smith for the gift membership and Megatron. I appreciate that. If you ever want to donate to the channel, you can go to agendafree.tv, agendafree.tv. But again, thank you for your support for letting this channel exist. Let me shout out, a quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, and you want to get the YouTube notifications turned on, which I think is helpful for finding out when we go live. You got to do this thing. Once you subscribe on YouTube, you got to do this thing where you click this bell. See that bell there? You got to click the bell and activate the bell and then click all notifications. So click the bell and choose all notifications on YouTube to make sure you get the YouTube notifications. Okay, now I want to thank also our supporters, our Twitch subscribers, our Facebook subscribers, and our YouTube members. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. Over there on Twitch, subscribers like Wall Street and Shaggy and Old Dude Mike and Clearly Crystal Clear and Dude Go T Sauce and Al Yat Sion and Uncle Floyd GG. Thank you for subscribing on Twitch. Mudmore and Sarah and Distant Galaxy, Allistic, and Tech Slug, Sarah. Who else is over there right now? All of our other subscribers there too. Thank you so much to our Twitch subscribers. Thank you. Also, our Facebook subscribers like Lou Green and Eve Richards and Diane Allworth, Robert Real II, Jane Summers, Susan Priest Buchner, if I'm remembering the name correctly, Billy Joe Drays, Duster Singer, Kay Lowry, Body, Margaret Riley, all of our other Facebook subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing over there. And thanks, Paula said she liked the articles. Thank you so much. They've been helpful. I agree with you. Thank you, Paula Thompson. And also our YouTube members like Turned Off, Amy, Crypto King Megatron, Donna Smith, Mama of Six. These are some of our YouTube members. Barry, Randy J, Troy Dodd, Ascend, Jean Romaine, Gator Fitz, Sonic Teal, Amy. I'm probably repeating some of these names. Sorry. Marissa Poulies, PZ Papazulu, Yael, Cheryl Simpson, Troy Dodd, Mystic Swan. I don't think I drank enough water during the stream. I apologize. Thomas Wick. Thanks for being a member. Yeah, we started late and we ended late tonight. Well, sometimes we start later depending on when the news is. Blackberry Gaming, Chris N. We've been covering a bunch of Israel and Middle Eastern stuff, so the schedule ends up getting switched because, you know, their day is night here and stuff. So it just has worked out that way. Lucky Minute, thanks for being a YouTube member. NY Committee, Head Crab, Lori Wagner, Mrs. John Johnson. Thanks for being a member. Samantha Womack, all of our other YouTube members, thank you, Megatron, and our other viewers like Awa Susi, CC Truck, Esreem Bell, Susie Irish, Dean Jacobs, Dennis Britt, all of our various viewers, thank you for watching the stream. All right, I think it's time. Did I say the Sugaro? Thanks, the Sugaro, for being a subscriber. Gina Pina, thanks for watching. All right, so we're wrapping this up. If there's big news, well, there will be some big news, but if there's big news tonight or tomorrow or whatever, I will certainly come on the air and cover it. Okay. I'm just checking here. All right, guys. That is it for now. You've been watching our live update on the Israel-Hamas hostage crisis in Gaza. That is it for now. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon with more live breaking news updates right here at Agenda Free TV.